Jake Malton was 35 years old when he died. He lived in Naperville, Illinois, a peaceful suburb near Chicago. Jake was a well-respected man with a sharp mind and a charming personality. He worked as a finance manager at a local investment firm, where he was known for his leadership skills and dedication. He had graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in finance and was seen as a rising star in his field. At home, Jake was a loving father and devoted husband. He lived with his wife, Laura Beth Malton, and their two children, Ponderosa and Arson. Jake had a passion for sailing Lake Michigan and spent many weekends at the local marina with his children. His kids loved these outings, and Jake often talked about buying a small sailboat. He was also an active member of the community, participating in local events and charity drives. Jake's personality was a mix of professionalism and warmth. He was friendly and approachable, making him well-liked by his colleagues and neighbors. Jake dreamed of one day taking a sabbatical to spend more time with his family and perhaps travel around the world. In the days leading up to his death, Jake was busy planning a family vacation to the Bahamas. He wanted to surprise his children with the trip, and they were excited about it. In February of 2012, Naperville was frigid, with temperatures often dipping below freezing. The local news was buzzing about the upcoming Super Bowl. Jake, a fan of the Chicago Bears, enjoyed discussing the games with his friends. He was also a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal and kept up with the latest news in finance and business. Jake and his family lived in a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood. Their house was always warm and inviting, with a cozy living room filled with family photos and mementos from their trips. The Malton family was close-knit, often spending evenings together watching movies or playing board games like Monopoly and Scrabble. In his professional life, Jake had recently been working on a big project at his firm, which had been taking up a lot of his time. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time for his family. His colleagues admired his ability to balance work and family life so well. Jake's dreams and plans for the future were cut short by his tragic death, leaving a void in the lives of those who knew and loved him. On the morning of February 18, 2012, at around 7:30 a.m., a tragic discovery was made in Naperville, Illinois. Laura Beth Malton, Jake Malton's wife, woke up and found her husband's body lying next to her in their bedroom. He had been shot twice. The room was eerily clean, with no signs of a struggle, which suggested that the crime had been planned. Laura Beth, upon finding Jake dead in their bed, was in a state of shock. She immediately called 911, her voice shaking as she spoke to the emergency operator. The operator tried to keep Laura Beth calm while dispatching police and emergency services to their home. Laura Beth's voice trembled as she described finding Jake. Her words were frantic, and she could hardly believe what she was seeing. The operator stayed on the line with her until help arrived. When the police arrived, they found Laura Beth sitting on the floor outside the bedroom, crying and holding her phone. The house was in perfect order, except for the horrifying sight in the bedroom. Jake was lying on the bed, and it was clear he had been dead for several hours. The officers immediately secured the area and began their investigation. By mid-morning, the news had spread throughout Naperville. Local news channels like NBC Chicago and newspapers such as the Chicago Tribune began reporting on the incident. The media coverage added to the tension as reporters and cameras gathered outside the Malton home. As the day went on, the police continued to piece together the events leading up to Jake's death. Laura Beth was taken to the station for questioning, still in a state of shock. The detectives knew they had to act quickly to solve the mystery of Jake Malton's death. On February 18, 2012, the police arrived quickly at the Malton home in Naperville, Illinois. They entered the quiet, neat house and found Laura Beth Malton sitting outside the bedroom, crying. The officers immediately secured the area and called in detectives. Detective Jason Hollis and Detective Sarah Lee Green, both experienced investigators, arrived soon after. Hollis was known for being methodical and detail-oriented, while Green had a reputation for her sharp intuition. They began by carefully examining the bedroom where Jake Malton's body was found. The scene was eerily tidy, with no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the murder had been carefully planned. Jake had been shot twice, and there was no sign of forced entry into the house. Detectives Hollis and Green used various tools to investigate the crime scene. They sprayed luminol, a chemical that glows blue in the presence of blood, to check for any traces that might have been cleaned up. They also took photographs and collected fingerprints from around the room. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, including fibers and hair samples, which they bagged and tagged for further analysis. The detectives then moved on to interviewing Laura Beth, who was still in shock. She told them that she had woken up to find Jake dead beside her. Her statements were emotional and confused, making it hard for the detectives to get a clear picture. The officers also spoke with the neighbors, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual, except for one elderly neighbor who mentioned hearing a loud noise the night before. As the investigation continued, the detectives discovered that Jake had been shot with a small-caliber handgun. They searched the house thoroughly, but did not find the weapon. This made them suspect that the killer had taken it with them. They also checked the security cameras in the neighborhood, hoping to find any clues, but the footage did not reveal any suspicious activity. The detectives knew they had to work quickly. They analyzed the evidence collected from the scene, hoping to find leads that would point them toward the murderer. The tidy crime scene, the lack of forced entry, and the missing weapon all suggested that the killer was someone who knew Jake well. Detectives Hollis and Green were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Jake Malton. The first suspect in Jake Malton's murder was his wife, Laura Beth Malton. Laura Beth was 32 years old and known for being outgoing and sociable. She had a passion for literature and loved hosting book clubs and charity events at their home. People in the community described her as warm and generous, but lately, some friends had noticed she seemed more withdrawn and anxious. Given that she had easy access to Jake's bedroom, the police had to consider her a suspect. On February 18, 2012, after the police secured the crime scene, Laura Beth was taken to the police station for questioning. The detectives, Jason Hollis and Sarah Lee Green, wanted to know more about her relationship with Jake and her activities the night he was killed. During the interrogation, Laura Beth was visibly upset. She was crying and seemed very confused. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had woken up and found Jake dead beside her. Detective Hollis asked her detailed questions about their relationship, and Laura Beth admitted that they had been going through a rough patch. She mentioned that Jake had been very busy with work and that they had been arguing more than usual. Detective Green asked about the gun used in the murder. Laura Beth denied knowing anything about it. She insisted that she did not own a gun and had no idea where it could have come from. The detectives noted that Laura Beth's responses were emotional, and at times she seemed overwhelmed. Her demeanor was a mix of sorrow and confusion, making it hard for the detectives to determine if she was hiding something or genuinely shocked by her husband's death. As the interrogation continued, the detectives learned more about the Maltons' financial situation. Laura Beth mentioned that Jake handled most of their finances and that she was not aware of any major issues. However, she did know that Jake had been stressed about a big project at work. Meanwhile, the police continued to gather evidence from the Malton home. They searched for any signs that could link Laura Beth to the crime. They checked her phone records, emails, and social media accounts, looking for any clues. Despite the lack of clear evidence pointing directly at Laura Beth, her emotional state and proximity to the crime made her a key figure in the investigation. The detectives knew they needed more information to either confirm or dismiss their suspicions about her involvement in Jake's death. The second suspect in Jake Malton's murder was his boss, Merl O'Brien. Merl was 48 years old and known as an ambitious, driven man. He had built his investment firm from the ground up and was described as a workaholic. Merl was meticulous and sometimes ruthless in his business dealings. Recently, Jake and Merl had disagreed over the direction of the company, leading to tension between them. On February 19, 2012, the day after Jake was found dead, detectives Jason Hollis and Sarah Lee Green brought Merl in for questioning. Merl arrived at the police station in a neat suit, looking calm and composed. He greeted the detectives with a firm handshake, showing no signs of nervousness. Detective Hollis started by asking Merl about his relationship with Jake. Merl admitted that they had disagreements, but insisted it was nothing out of the ordinary for business partners. He spoke highly of Jake's skills and expressed shock at his death. Detective Green then asked about the night of the murder. Merl provided an alibi, stating he was at a company dinner event. He even named several colleagues who could confirm his whereabouts. The detectives also questioned Merl about rumors that Jake was planning to report him for sexually harassing secretaries at the firm. Merl's demeanor shifted slightly, but he remained composed. He denied any wrongdoing and suggested that Jake might have been mistaken or misled. The police also investigated Merl's financial records and found that Jake had been handling a major project that could have impacted the company's future. This project had been a source of their recent disagreements. The detectives considered the possibility that Merl had a financial motive to get rid of Jake. As the questioning continued, Merl kept his composure, calmly answering all of the detectives' questions. He maintained that he had no reason to harm Jake and that their disagreements were purely professional. Detective Hollis and Detective Green noted that while Merl seemed to have a solid alibi, his motive couldn't be ignored. They decided to verify his alibi by speaking with his colleagues and checking the event's guest list. They also continued to look into the company's financial dealings, hoping to find more clues. Despite Merl's calm and collected responses, the detectives knew they had to keep investigating all angles. Merl remained a key suspect as they worked to uncover the truth behind Jake Malton's murder. On February 21, 2012, 3 days after Jake Malton's death, the weather in Naperville was cold and overcast. At around 10:00 a.m., a breakthrough in the case occurred. A neighbor, while walking her dog near the Malton home, was shocked to find a small handgun in a nearby park. The park was a popular spot for families and dog walkers, making it an unusual place to find a weapon. The neighbor immediately called the police. Detectives Jason Hollis and Sarah Lee Green were informed about the new evidence. They felt a sense of urgency as they awaited the forensic results. Later that afternoon, the forensic team confirmed that the handgun was indeed the one used to kill Jake. The discovery of the gun was a significant development in the investigation. The detectives reviewed the security footage from the park but found nothing suspicious. They decided to canvass the neighborhood again, hoping to find witnesses who might have seen someone disposing of the gun. They spoke with several residents, including an elderly neighbor, who mentioned seeing a woman walking toward the park late at night, but she couldn't identify her. As they investigated further, Detective Hollis found fingerprints on the gun. The prints matched those of Marie Castelin, the Maltons' next-door neighbor and a close friend of Laura Beth. Marie was known for being kind-hearted and loyal. This connection made her a key person of interest. With this new evidence, the detectives felt they were getting closer to solving the case. The discovery of the gun and the connection to Marie added a new layer of complexity, but it also brought them one step closer to finding Jake Malton's murderer. The third suspect in Jake Malton's murder was Marie Castelin, the Maltons' next-door neighbor. Marie, 38, was known for her kindness and loyalty in the community, but she harbored a secret life as well. Under the alias Cookie LaGuardia, Marie worked as a stripper, a fact that added a layer of complexity to the investigation. On February 22, 2012, detectives Jason Hollis and Sarah Lee Green brought Marie in for questioning. The day was cold and cloudy, typical of February in Naperville. Mary looked nervous as she entered the police station, aware that her fingerprints had been found on the gun used to kill Jake. Detective Hollis started the interrogation by asking Marie about her relationship with the Maltons. She admitted that she and Jake had been having an affair, but insisted that she had nothing to do with his murder. Marie explained that she had been home alone the night Jake was killed, which made her alibi weak. Detective Green then asked about the handgun found in the park. Mary became visibly anxious and struggled to explain how her fingerprints ended up on the weapon. She said that Jake had visited her a few days before his death and brought the gun with him. According to Mary, Jake was worried about their affair being discovered and wanted to protect her. However, this explanation seemed suspicious to the detectives. The police also discovered that Jake had secretly mortgaged his house to pay Mary's bills. This financial connection added another layer to the investigation, suggesting a possible motive for Marie. Despite her calm and kind demeanor, the detectives knew they had to dig deeper into her background. As they questioned Marie further, the detectives noticed inconsistencies in her story. She initially claimed she had no idea Jake was planning to visit her the night of his death, but later admitted he had called her earlier that day. Detective Hollis pressed on, asking why she hadn't mentioned this earlier. Mary became flustered and started to stammer. To gather more evidence, the detectives decided to search Marie's home. They found letters from Jake expressing regret over their affair and hinting at emotional manipulation within his marriage. These letters provided insight into Jake's state of mind and suggested that he was planning to confess to Laura Beth and end the affair. Detectives Hollis and Green knew they had to proceed carefully. They continued to investigate Mary's connection to Jake, hoping to find the evidence needed to solve the case and bring justice for Jake Malton. On February 23, 2012, the police in Naperville, Illinois, were ready to make an arrest in the murder of Jake Malton. After days of investigation, they had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The police had pieced together a tragic story of betrayal, financial stress, and emotional breakdown. The detectives found a crucial piece of evidence in Jake's home office, a letter he had written to his children, Ponderosa and Arson. In the letter, Jake expressed regret and guilt over his affair with Marie Castelin. He also mentioned his plans to confess to Laura Beth and end the affair. The letter showed a darker side of Jake, hinting at emotional manipulation within his marriage. This letter, combined with the evidence gathered, pointed to Laura Beth Malton as the murderer. Detectives Jason Hollis and Sarah Lee Green arrived at the Malton home at 9:00 a.m. to arrest Laura Beth. The morning was cold, with a light snowfall covering the ground. Laura Beth was in the kitchen, making breakfast for her children. When the detectives informed her of the arrest, she was visibly shocked. She broke down in tears, repeatedly screaming, "Let those without sin cast the first stone." The detectives carefully explained the evidence against her. They mentioned the financial stress caused by Jake's secret mortgage to pay Mary's bills and the emotional toll of discovering his affair. They also pointed out the letter Jake had written, which showed his intention to confess and the manipulation within their marriage. Laura Beth's world had been shattered by these revelations, leading her to a breaking point. Laura Beth was handcuffed and taken to the police station. The local news stations, including NBC Chicago, quickly picked up the story. Reporters gathered outside the Malton home, capturing the moment as Laura Beth was led away by the police. The community was in shock, struggling to comprehend how a seemingly perfect family could be torn apart by such a tragedy. At the police station, Laura Beth made a chilling confession to the murder. She explained that she had found out about Jake's affair and the financial problems he had caused. In a moment of utter despair and emotional breakdown, she had shot Jake in their bedroom, unable to cope with the betrayal and stress. She admitted to disposing of the gun in the nearby park, hoping to distance herself from the crime. The arrest of Laura Beth brought a sense of relief to Jake's family and friends, but it also left them with a deep sadness. They struggled to understand how things had gone so wrong. The detectives felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow, knowing they had solved the case, but also aware of the devastating impact on the Malton family. The trial of Laura Beth Malton began on May 15, 2012, in Naperville, Illinois. The courtroom was packed with local residents, reporters from NBC Chicago, and members of Jake Malton's family. The atmosphere was tense as everyone awaited the outcome of this tragic case. The prosecution was led by Assistant State's Attorney Michael Health Backley, a 45-year-old known for his strong sense of justice and meticulous preparation. Health Backley argued that Laura Beth had carefully planned the murder of her husband, driven by jealousy and financial stress. He presented evidence of Jake's affair with Marie Castelin, the financial problems due to the secret mortgage, and the letter Jake had written, which showed his intention to confess and end the affair. Health Backley painted a picture of Laura Beth as a woman pushed to the edge, ultimately committing a desperate act of violence. The defense attorney, Dorothea Blake, a 38-year-old with a reputation for her empathetic approach, represented Laura Beth. Blake argued that Laura Beth was a devoted wife and mother who had been emotionally manipulated by Jake. She claimed that Laura Beth's actions were the result of a momentary breakdown caused by extreme emotional distress. Blake highlighted Laura Beth's clean record and her dedication to her family, suggesting that she was not capable of premeditated murder. As the trial proceeded, the emotional toll on Jake's family was evident. His children, Ponderosa and Arson, were seen in the courtroom, supported by other family members. They appeared heartbroken and confused, struggling to understand the events that had led to their father's death and their mother's trial. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days. On June 1, 2012, they returned with a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Laura Beth Malton to 20 years in prison, considering the emotional distress she had been under, but also the severity of her crime. The reaction to the verdict was mixed. Jake's family felt a sense of justice, but were also saddened by the reality that Laura Beth, someone they had known and loved, was responsible for his death. Some community members felt the sentence was too lenient, while others believed it was fair given the circumstances. The trial and verdict had a profound effect on everyone involved. Jake's family and friends were left to pick up the pieces, struggling with the loss of both Jake and Laura Beth. The community of Naperville was deeply affected as they had lost a respected member and witnessed the unraveling of what seemed to be a perfect family. In the aftermath, discussions about emotional health and the pressures of maintaining a facade and seemingly perfect lives became more prominent. The trial had not only brought closure to Jake's murder, but also shed light on the underlying issues that led to this tragic event. After Laura Beth Malton's trial and sentencing, life in Naperville slowly returned to normal, But the effects of Jake Malton's murder lingered in the community. The Malton children, Ponderosa and Arson, were taken in by their grandparents, who provided them with love and stability during this difficult time. They received support from neighbors and friends, who rallied around them in their grief. Meanwhile, the Malton family home became a quiet reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded there. The neighbors, who had once seen the Maltons as a model family, now whispered about the secrets that had torn them apart. The local newspaper, Naperville Sun, covered the aftermath of the trial extensively, reflecting on the impact of the case on the tight-knit community. Laura Beth Malton began serving her sentence at White Correctional Center, a women's prison in Illinois. Her adjustment to prison life was difficult, as she navigated the challenges of being away from her children and coming to terms with her actions. Reports from the prison mentioned that Laura Beth kept to herself, spending her days reflecting on her choices and participating in prison programs aimed at rehabilitation. The trial also sparked discussions in Naperville about the pressures of maintaining appearances and the impact of emotional distress on individuals and families. Some community members advocated for better mental health support, while others emphasized the importance of open communication in relationships. In the years following the trial, Ponderosa and Arson grew up surrounded by love and support from their extended family. They remembered their father fondly and cherished the memories they had of him sailing and enjoying family vacations. Their resilience and strength became a testament to the community's ability to come together in the face of adversity. Lily Vivance, a warm-hearted and caring individual, was a pillar of her family. At the age of 40, she dedicated her life to her husband and 2 children, Vicky and Becton, ensuring their happiness and well-being. Her nurturing personality extended beyond the confines of her home, as she actively participated in her children's lives, organizing playdates and engaging in various activities that fostered their growth and development. She was known among her friends and neighbors as a pillar of support, always ready with a listening ear and a helping hand. In addition to her role as a loving mother, Lily pursued her passion for writing as a freelance writer. She immersed herself in the world of online publications, contributing articles that showcased her talent and creativity. Lily's dedication to her craft was evident in every piece she produced, capturing the attention of readers and earning her a respectable reputation within the writing community. March of 2004 was a time of hope and anticipation for Lily. The cherry blossoms bloomed, painting the streets of Beaverton, Oregon with delicate shades of pink. The local community buzzed with excitement for the upcoming St. Patrick's Day Parade, a cherished tradition that brought together people from all walks of life. As we delve deeper into this true crime case, we will unravel the web of deception that entangled Lily Vivance. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of this tragic tale, questioning the true nature of those closest to Lily in a quest for knowledge and justice. In a quiet neighborhood of Beaverton, Oregon, tragedy struck on the morning of March 29, 2004. Lily Vivance, a devoted wife and mother, met a horrifying fate within the walls of her own home. The discovery of her lifeless body sent shockwaves through the close-knit community, leaving friends and family in a state of disbelief. The grim revelation was made by Patty Berlin, a trusted family friend who had come over for a routine visit. Little did she know that this visit would forever change her life. As Patty entered the Vivance residence, the atmosphere seemed eerily still. The air carried a sense of unease, as if a dark secret was lurking behind closed doors. As she made her way through the house, Patty's heart sank when she stumbled upon Lily's lifeless body. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of Patty's trembling breath. She immediately dialed emergency services, her voice filled with anguish as she relayed the devastating news to the dispatcher. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene, their sirens piercing the tranquility of the neighborhood. The officers carefully examined the crime scene, meticulously documenting every detail. The room where Lily's body lay became a haunting tableau of sorrow and unanswered questions. News of the tragic incident spread like wildfire throughout the community. The local media outlets, such as the Beaverton Tribune and KATU News, were quick to report on the shocking discovery. The town, usually known for its peaceful, blandly suburban charm, was now gripped by a sense of fear and uncertainty. The tragic investigation into the death of Lily Vivance would prove to be a complex and arduous task for the authorities as they sought to uncover the truth behind this chilling crime. The Beaverton Police Department swiftly responded to the distressing call on the morning of March 29, 2004. Detectives Audrey Buscare and Randy Pochette, seasoned investigators with a reputation for their unwavering determination, were assigned to the case. As they arrived at the scene, a sense of urgency filled the air, and their focused expressions mirrored the gravity of the situation. The crime scene, Lily Vivant's terrene home, became the center of meticulous scrutiny. Every inch of the house was combed through with painstaking precision, as the detectives sought to unravel the truth behind Lily's untimely demise. The room where she was tragically suffocated to death with a pillow presented a haunting sight. The air hung heavy with the scent of despair, as if the very walls mourned the loss of a beloved member of the community. Despite the absence of any visible signs of struggle or forced entry, the detectives were determined to leave no stone unturned. They meticulously examined every nook and cranny, searching for even the tiniest clue that could shed light on the chilling mystery. The atmosphere crackled with a mix of suspense and anticipation as the investigators methodically collected evidence, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The investigation team's efforts were complemented by cutting-edge forensic technology, which brought a new level of precision to the examination of the crime scene. Dusting for fingerprints, analyzing DNA samples, and scouring the area for trace evidence became routine tasks for the forensic experts involved in the case. The room was transformed into a laboratory of truth, where science and logic intertwined in the pursuit of justice. As news of the shocking crime spread, the community of Beaverton united in grief and fear. The local media outlets, such as the Beaverton Gazette and the Oregon Daily News, covered the story extensively, highlighting the impact of the tragedy on the close-knit neighborhood. March of 2004 became a time of collective unease in Beaverton as the investigation continued to unfold. The detectives, driven by their commitment to justice, worked tirelessly day and night. The weight of responsibility rested on their shoulders as they sought to bring closure to Lily Vivant's grieving family and restore a sense of security to the community. Mike Vivant, a 46-year-old man from Beaverton, Oregon, became the prime suspect in the shocking murder case of his wife, Lily Vivant. The investigation revealed a web of secrets and lies that Mike had carefully hidden from his beloved wife. Described by neighbors as reserved and analytical, Mike had always presented himself as a devoted husband and father. However, behind closed doors, he was running an online business that was far from the idyllic family life he portrayed. The police, led by detectives Audrey Buscare and Randy Pochette, delved deep into Mike's hidden world, uncovering a potential motive rooted in his fear of Lily discovering his illicit activities. Mike's secret online business was no ordinary venture. The investigation revealed that Mike had set up a sophisticated network of buyers and sellers using code names and encrypted communication channels to evade detection. He operated under the guise of a legitimate business, using a front company to launder money and cover his tracks. The police meticulously analyzed his financial records, tracing the flow of funds and uncovering a complex web of transactions that pointed directly to Mike's involvement in some illegal trade. As the detectives interrogated Mike, his facade of innocence began to crumble. Anger and defensiveness seeped through his carefully crafted veneer, raising suspicions among the investigators. The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. Mike's possible motive became clear. He couldn't afford for Lily to discover the truth about his secret internet activities, as it would not only jeopardize his freedom and finances, but also expose their family to danger. As the case unfolded, the community of Beaverton watched with bated breath, wondering if the unassuming Mike Vivant was indeed capable of such a heinous act. The answer to that question lay buried in the gigabytes of data on his home computer and in the depths of the internet's shadowy corners. Wade Caterpie, a 24-year-old close friend of Lily Vivant's, emerged as a person of interest in the ongoing investigation into her tragic death. In the tranquil suburban town of Beaverton, Oregon, where everyone seemingly knows everyone, Wade was known for his vibrant personality and close bond with Lily. However, beneath the friendly facade, there may have been a simmering envy towards Lily's husband, Mike Vivant. As the investigation deepened, detectives Audrey Buscare and Randy Pochette turned their attention to Wade, seeking to uncover any potential motivations or involvement in this heinous crime. The police have been diligently piecing together the puzzle of Lily's murder, leaving no stone unturned. Wade's initial shock and disbelief upon hearing the news quickly transformed into a defensive stance as the police questioned him. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, but the detectives remained steadfast in their pursuit of the truth. Their investigation has revealed a series of intriguing details surrounding Wade's relationship with Lily and his potential motive. The authorities uncovered evidence suggesting that Wade may have harbored deep-seated feelings of envy towards Mike Vivance. Friends and acquaintances recall Wade's occasional remarks about Mike's success and the seemingly perfect life he had built with Lily. These feelings of envy, coupled with Wade's close proximity to the couple, have raised suspicions among the investigators. Furthermore, the detectives discovered a series of heated arguments between Wade and Lily in the months leading up to her untimely demise. These arguments centered around Wade's discontent with his own life and his perceived inadequacies when compared to Mike. The police explored whether these arguments could have escalated into something far more sinister. As the investigation progresses, the detectives left no stone unturned. They were meticulously analyzing phone records, interviewing potential witnesses, and scrutinizing Wade's alibi during the time of the crime. The detectives are also examining Wade's online presence, searching for any clues that may shed light on his potential involvement. As the investigation into Lily Vivance's tragic murder unfolded, the police were met with a breakthrough that would send shockwaves through the community. On a rainy afternoon in Beaverton, Oregon, a passerby stumbled upon a hidden compartment in Mike Vivance's home office, unearthing a dark secret that would expose the true nature of his sinister activities. Inside the hidden compartment, the police discovered a trove of incriminating documents and records that revealed the extent of Mike's involvement in a clandestine online business. It was revealed that Mike was the owner-operator of a website known as Live Girls Now, which operated as an international online slave market for women and girls. The evidence collected painted a chilling picture of the operation. Detailed records showed the names, ages, and personal information of hundreds of victims, each one a tragic casualty of this heinous crime. The website had been operating for 5 years, exploiting vulnerable individuals and perpetuating a cycle of abuse, suffering, and slavery. The police wasted no time in seizing the evidence, meticulously documenting each piece to build a solid case against Mike Vivance. They worked tirelessly, cross-referencing the information with missing person reports and collaborating with law enforcement agencies across the globe to identify and rescue the victims involved. As news of the investigation spread, shockwaves rippled through the community, leaving residents in disbelief that such a dark operation could have been operating right under their noses. The case garnered significant media attention, with local news outlets shining a spotlight on the chilling crimes committed by Mike Vivance. March of 2004 became a turning point in the fight against human trafficking, as the revelations surrounding Live Girls now prompted a wave of public outrage and a renewed commitment to combat this insidious crime. Nonprofit organizations and law enforcement agencies joined forces, launching awareness campaigns and dedicating resources to rescue victims and bring the perpetrators to justice. The investigation into Lily Vivance's murder had taken an unexpected turn, uncovering a web of darkness that extended far beyond the confines of her tragic demise. As the police continued their relentless pursuit of justice, they were determined to ensure that the victims of Live Girls Now would find solace and that Mike Vivance would face the full weight of the law. In a shocking turn of events, the investigation into Lily Vivance's tragic murder took an unexpected twist with the emergence of Harris Caltran, a 21-year-old amateur detective with a troubled past. Known for his run-ins with the law, Harris had a rap sheet filled with violence towards women, dating back to when he was just 12 years old. Despite his checkered history, Harris presented himself as a determined amateur detective seeking justice for Lily. The police, already grappling with the complexities of the case, turned their attention towards Harris. They interrogated him extensively, probing into his motives and potential involvement in the crime. Harris's anger and frustration were palpable as he vehemently denied any connection to Lily's murder. To understand Harris's possible involvement, the police delved into his background. They discovered that Harris had a fascination with true crime stories and had spent countless hours studying criminal investigations. His knowledge of forensic techniques and crime scene analysis, while amateur, was still impressive, leading some to believe he could be an asset to the investigation. As the investigation progressed, the police uncovered a series of emails exchanged between Harris and Lily. These emails revealed a shared interest in true crime and a mutual desire to uncover the truth. The police wondered if Harris's involvement went beyond mere curiosity. To further complicate matters, Harris had recently been involved in a local dispute with a group of individuals who were known to be involved in criminal activities. The police explored the possibility of a connection between this dispute and Lily's murder, but the evidence remained circumstantial at best. With the investigation still ongoing, the police were left with more questions than answers. Was Harris a genuine crusader for justice, or was he hiding a dark secret? Only time would tell. In a shocking turn of events, the true mastermind behind the heinous murder of Lily Vivance was revealed. After weeks of tireless investigation, the police identified and apprehended the culprit responsible for snuffing out the life of this beloved mother and freelance writer. Mike Vivance, the husband of the victim, was exposed as the cold-blooded murderer who orchestrated this chilling crime. Mike's motive was that he feared Lily's discovery of his illicit activities. The discovery of his secret online business, Live Girls Now, shed light on his sinister motives. This website, operating as an international online slave market for women and girls, was a dark and twisted operation, a sort of eBay for human beings that exploited the vulnerability of innocent lives. The evidence against Mike was overwhelming, leaving investigators with no doubt about his involvement in Lily's murder. The police found incriminating documents and records hidden in a secret compartment of his home office. These damning materials provided a glimpse into the depths of his depravity. It is truly horrifying to think that such a heinous enterprise was thriving right under the noses of his wife, kids, and the unsuspecting community. The police swiftly apprehended Mike Vivance, bringing an end to his reign of terror. The arrest took place in the very same town where the infamous Oregon vortex, a mysterious natural phenomenon, had captured the attention of the nation just a few years prior. The arrest have sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Beaverton, Oregon. Friends and neighbors were left in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the image they had of a devoted husband and father with the cold-blooded killer he turned out to be. This case serves as a stark reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even within the confines of a seemingly idyllic suburban neighborhood. As the news of Mike Vivance's arrest spread, it served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind closed doors. It is a testament to the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the importance of community vigilance in safeguarding against such atrocities. The trial that followed the shocking murder of Lily Vivance in March 2004 gripped the small suburb of Beaverton, Oregon. As the courtroom doors swung open, District Attorney Rebecca Bailovsky and Defense Attorney David Dean Buscare prepared to battle it out in front of a jury of 12 ordinary citizens. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting a compelling case against the defendant, Mike Vivance. With meticulous attention to detail, they painted a vivid picture of Lily's tragic fate and the sinister underbelly of Mike's secret internet business. Expert witnesses, such as forensic pathologists and computer analysts, took the stand to testify to the overwhelming evidence against the accused. One of the key pieces of evidence presented was the discovery of a hidden compartment in Mike's home office. Inside, the police found incriminating documents and records of his online slave market, Live Girls Now. The courtroom gasped in disbelief as the extent of Mike's depravity was revealed. The prosecution argued that Mike's fear of Lily uncovering his illicit activities drove him to commit the heinous act. Defense attorney David Dean Buscare fought tooth and nail to undermine the prosecution's case. He attempted to cast doubt on the validity of the evidence, questioning the reliability of witnesses and challenging the methods used to gather information. Buscare argued that the hidden compartment could have been tampered with, suggesting the possibility of a setup. After weeks of testimonies, cross-examinations, and impassioned closing arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. The town held its breath as the verdict was announced. Guilty, Mike Vivance was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. As the courtroom emptied, Lily's family and friends found a bittersweet solace in the verdict. Justice had been served, but the void left by Lily's absence remained. The community, scarred by the tragedy, vowed to come together and support one another in the healing process. After the trial that captivated the small town of Beaverton, Oregon, The lives of those involved took different paths. Lily Vivant's family, still grappling with the pain of their loss, found solace in the support of their community. The local church, St. Mary's, organized a memorial service to honor Lily's memory, bringing together friends, neighbors, and even strangers who were touched by her kindness. The service was filled with tears and heartfelt tributes, as people shared stories of Lily's impact on their lives. Wade Caterpie, burdened by his unrequited love for Lily, sought help from a grief counselor named Dr. Darna Sanchez. Dr. Sanchez, a respected psychologist in the community, guided Wade through the process of healing and self-discovery. Through this journey, Wade learned to channel his emotions into positive outlets, such as writing poetry and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Harris Caltran, the amateur detective with a troubled past, continued his quest for justice. Inspired by Lily's tragic fate, Harris dedicated himself to advocating for victims of crime. He started a blog called Justice Seekers, where he shared stories of unsolved cases and raised awareness about the importance of community involvement in crime prevention. As for Mike Vivance, his life took a drastic turn behind bars. Incarcerated at the Oregon State Penitentiary, Mike was confined to a small cell surrounded by concrete walls and steel bars. Stripped of his freedom, he was forced to confront the consequences of his heinous actions. In prison, Mike underwent counseling and therapy to address the underlying issues that led him down a path of darkness. March of 2004 marked a turning point for the community of Beaverton. The tragic events surrounding Lily Vivance's murder shook the town to its core, but it also brought people together in a shared commitment to healing and justice. The story of Lily Vivance's murder serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly ordinary lives. It highlights the importance of trust, honesty, and the pursuit of justice. Callie Carter was 34 years old and worked as an assistant district attorney in Galveston County, Texas. She was well known in her town for being very good at her job, especially when it came to fighting crime involving the many cults that operated in the area. Many people in Galveston admired her hard work and dedication. Callie was not just about her job. She was also a big part of the community. She often organized charity events to help people in need and loved participating in the town's festivals, like the annual Galveston Island Food and Wine Festival. Callie lived in a cozy house on a quiet street in Galveston. She was married to James Carter, though their relationship had become strained. Despite this, she remained hopeful and focused on her future. She had big dreams for her career and wanted to make Galveston a safer place for everyone. Callie attended the University of Texas at Austin for her law degree, where she graduated with honors. Her passion for law and justice was evident from a young age, often talking about her dreams of someday becoming the judge when she was just 3 years old. Her life was full of promise and potential, and she had a bright future ahead of her. Callie's family was very important to her. She had a close relationship with her parents, Linda and Robert Jenkins, who lived nearby in Houston. She also had an older brother, Tim, a successful judge in Montana who often visited with his wife and kids. Callie's friends described her as optimistic and full of energy. She was always smiling and had a positive outlook on life, even when things were tough. In the days before her death, Callie was busy preparing for a big case against a new cult that had begun attracting members around Galveston Beach. She spent long hours at the office, but still made time to help organize a local charity event to support homeless shelters. She was excited about the future and had plans to take a short vacation with her family after the trial. Callie's untimely death left a void in the community and among those who loved her. Her dedication to her work and her caring nature made her a beloved figure in Galveston. On the morning of June 12, 2004, Galveston was waking up to a warm, sunny day. The town was quiet, with people going about their usual routines. Emily Ruiz, a close friend and neighbor of Callie Carter, was worried. Callie had missed their morning jogs, something she never did. Emily decided to check on her, hoping everything was okay. Emily walked to Callie's house, which was just a few houses down the street. She knocked on the door but got no answer. Growing more concerned, Emily tried the door and found it unlocked. She stepped inside, calling out for Callie. As she walked into the living room, she was met with a horrifying sight. Callie was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. She had been stabbed multiple times, and there were strange marks all over her body. Emily's heart raced as she pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the operator.
911, what's your emergency? It's my friend, Callie Carter. She's on the floor. There's blood everywhere. I think she's dead. Please, send help.
The 911 operator tried to calm Emily down while dispatching emergency services to the scene. Emily, still in shock, could hardly believe what she was seeing. She stayed on the phone with the operator, who asked her to wait outside until the police arrived. Police and emergency medical services arrived quickly at the scene. They found Emily outside, still in tears and clearly traumatized. The police immediately began to assess the scene and secure the perimeter. They called in forensics experts to help gather evidence. As news of the murder spread through Galveston, the community was in shock. Callie Carter was a well-known and respected figure, and her violent death left everyone reeling. The small town known for its beach and pier was suddenly the center of a major crime investigation. The police arrived at Callie Carter's house quickly after Emily Ruiz's 911 call on the morning of June 12, 2004. It was a sunny day in Galveston, Texas, but the scene inside the house was grim. Detective Sarah Jenkins and Officer Mark Davis led the investigation. Known for their attention to detail, they knew this was going to be a tough case. Detective Jenkins, a cousin of Callie and a seasoned investigator with a calm demeanor, took charge immediately. She directed the officers to secure the area and keep onlookers away. Officer Davis, who was younger and eager, followed her lead, making sure everything was handled by the book. The crime scene in Callie's living room was chaotic. Blood was splattered on the walls and furniture, showing signs of a violent struggle. Callie's body lay in the middle of the room, with multiple stab wounds and strange marks on her skin. The letter Z had been branded in several places on her body, adding a disturbing element to the scene. Forensics experts arrived and began their work. They used luminol to check for hidden blood traces, revealing more about the brutal attack. They dusted for fingerprints, collected hair and fiber samples, and carefully photographed the entire area. The forensics team worked methodically, knowing that every piece of evidence could be crucial. Detective Jenkins noticed a broken vase and some scattered papers, which suggested a fight had taken place. She pointed these out to Officer Davis, who made detailed notes. They also found a bloody knife in the kitchen sink, which was quickly bagged as evidence. While Jenkins and Davis were busy inside, officers canvassed the neighborhood, talking to anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual. A few neighbors reported hearing loud noises the night before, but no one had called the police. As the investigation continued, Jenkins and Davis discussed possible motives. They knew Callie was working on prosecuting a strange cult that had been attracting hundreds of converts in the Galveston area. The branding with the letter Z seemed like a possible link to the cult. Detective Jenkins also remembered that Callie's husband, James Carter, had a troubled past and a rocky relationship with Callie. They decided to question him as soon as possible. The detectives knew they had to consider all possibilities and leave no stone unturned. James Carter, 36, was the first suspect in the investigation. He was Callie's husband, and their relationship had been increasingly rocky. James was known around Galveston as a lazy, unemployed man, very different from his successful wife. People often saw him arguing with Callie in public. James had a history of cheating and had been acting strangely in the weeks before Callie's murder. The police brought James in for questioning on the afternoon of June 12, 2004. Detective Sarah Jenkins and Officer Mark Davis conducted the interrogation. James appeared nervous and restless, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact.
Where were you last night?
I was home, watching Jay Leno in the Reagan funeral.
Can anyone confirm that?
No, not really. Callie went to bed early. I was alone.
Detective Jenkins took note of his inconsistent alibi. She knew they needed more to go on, so she continued to probe.
We found a bloody knife in your kitchen sink. How do you explain that?
I don't know. I didn't touch no knife.
As the questioning continued, James's story seemed to fall apart. He couldn't provide a clear timeline of his actions the night Callie was murdered. His behavior became more erratic, and he started to sweat.
James, we know you'd been having an affair with a woman named Maureen. Did Callie find out about her?
She knew. But that ain't mean I killed her.
Throughout the interrogation, James's responses were inconsistent and unconvincing. Detective Jenkins decided to take a break and regroup. They needed to verify his alibi and gather more evidence before they could move forward. The police also searched James's personal belongings and found troubling evidence. There were sexually explicit letters from several women. They also found a hidden stash of $3,000, raising more questions about James' activities. As the day went on, it became clear that James Carter was hiding something. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the truth. They decided to question Maureen next, hoping to find more links between her and James. Galveston was buzzing with rumors about the case. Everyone was eager for answers, and the police were determined to provide them. They worked tirelessly, knowing that every detail could bring them closer to solving the murder of Callie Carter. The second suspect in the investigation was Maureen Zaftrapines, 56, the secretive leader of Xenon philosophy, a new cult that had been quickly gaining popularity around Galveston. The teachings of the group were based on the 1999 Disney Channel original movie Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century.
Hello, I am Maureen Zaftrapines, agent of Lady Xenon Carr. Today I invite you to explore Xenon philosophy, a futuristic vision, and a prophecy of humanity's evolution towards cosmic enlightenment. Through chanting of Lord Protozo's sacred lyrics, we attune our souls to the cosmic frequencies, preparing ourselves for the journey towards higher realms of existence. Our sacred branding of the letter Z symbolizes our commitment to Xenon philosophy as we embark on the path of spiritual enlightenment. We are not just individuals, but a cosmic community united by our shared vision. As we journey towards the stars, let us embrace the teachings of the Xenon philosophy, for within its wisdom lies the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe and the boundless potential of our souls. May the light of Lady Xenon guide us on our cosmic voyage. Cetus Lupitus.
The group believed that the futuristic vision presented in the movie, known to members as Xenon philosophy, was a prophetic glimpse into humanity's destiny, and that a character in the movie, Protozo, a rock star, was a prophet whose lyrics contained hidden messages and spiritual truths. Members considered his songs to be sacred texts, often reciting and analyzing them for guidance. They believed that through spiritual purity and adherence to their teachings, members would travel to the space station featured in the movie. More importantly, the group considered the letter Z, short for Xenon, to be a holy symbol representing the ultimate spiritual journey. Members believed that the Z had protective and purifying powers and often used it in rituals and branding. Initiation involved a branding ceremony, where new members received a Z mark. This, combined with the fact that Callie Carter had been preparing to prosecute the cult for stockpiling weapons, made Maureen a key person of interest. Detective Sarah Jenkins and Officer Mark Davis brought Maureen in for questioning on June 13, 2004. Maureen arrived at the station dressed in 5 to 11 tactical wear. Her usual calm and composed demeanor was deeply unsettling. When asked about her whereabouts the night Callie was murdered, Maureen claimed she was at the group's headquarters leading their evening meditation. She insisted that hundreds of followers could confirm her alibi. The detectives knew they needed to verify this, but continued to press her about her relationship with Callie and the prosecution case. Maureen maintained that she and Callie had no personal quarrel, and that she was simply doing her job as Callie was doing hers. Despite her calm exterior, the detectives sensed Maureen was hiding something. They questioned her about her connection with James Carter, noting how he admitted to a sexual relationship with he. Maureen admitted to having spoken with James a few times but denied any romantic involvement. The detectives presented Maureen with letters found in James' belongings that suggested a deeper connection between them. Maureen dismissed the letters, stating that she wrote to thousands of prospective members and implying that the letters meant nothing. As the interrogation continued, Maureen's responses remained measured and deliberate. She never lost her composure, even when the detectives brought up the brandings of the letter Z found on Callie's body, a symbol associated with Xenon philosophy. Maureen brushed off the connection, stating that many things start with the letter Z, and it did not implicate her or her followers. The detectives ended the interrogation, planning to verify her alibi with her followers and dig deeper into Maureen's background and the group's activities. They returned to the crime scene, re-examining everything for any connections to Maureen or her cult. They interviewed members and looked into the group's finances and records, uncovering a complex web of relationships and secrets. Meanwhile, the community was in a state of unease. News of the murder and the involvement of the strange cult had everyone on edge. People were talking about it in cafes at the beach and on the popular local radio station KGL. Detective Jenkins and Officer Davis were determined to uncover the truth. They knew that every detail mattered and that Maureen Zaftrapines was a critical piece of the puzzle. As the investigation into Callie Carter's murder unfolded, the focus shifted to uncovering new evidence that could shed light on the events leading up to her death. Maureen Zaftrapines, a leader of Xenon philosophy, initially emerged as a suspect due to her connection with James Carter and the contentious relationship between the Carters. As detectives delved deeper, though, they found that Maureen's alibi was solid, supported by corroborating evidence and witness testimonies. However, while she was not directly implicated in Callie's murder, it became clear that while she had been involved in an affair with James. Nevertheless, a significant revelation emerged during the investigation. Maureen had been blackmailing Callie. Threatening to expose their affair with James, Maureen pressured Callie to abandon her prosecution of Xenon philosophy. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the case, suggesting a motive rooted in personal vendetta and coercion. The blackmailing scheme exerted immense pressure on Callie, worsening tensions within her marriage and contributing to James's already unstable mental state. The realization that his extramarital affair was at risk of exposure, coupled with the prospect of financial ruin resulting from Callie's intention to leave him, possibly pushed James to a breaking point. The police, armed with this newfound understanding of the circumstances surrounding Callie's murder, intensified their scrutiny of James Carter. His erratic behavior, history of infidelity, and the mounting evidence linking him to the crime scene made him a prime suspect in their eyes. Meanwhile, the revelation of Maureen's blackmailing tactics sent shockwaves through the community, prompting widespread speculation and scrutiny of the Xenon philosophy. Galveston's residents grappled with the unsettling realization that their beloved assistant district attorney had been ensnared in a web of deceit and manipulation orchestrated by those closest to her. The third suspect in the investigation was Michael Lawson, an 82-year-old local police officer with a long history in Galveston. Michael had a complicated relationship with Callie Carter. They had dated briefly before she married James, and rumors suggested that his patronage helped her rise quickly to the position of assistant district attorney. Michael had never fully moved on from their relationship and was known to harbor lingering feelings for Callie. On June 14, 2004, detectives decided to bring Michael in for questioning. His advanced age and distinguished career in law enforcement added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Michael arrived at the station in his uniform, carrying himself with the dignity of a seasoned officer, but there was a noticeable tension in his demeanor. Detectives Sarah Jenkins and Mark Davis led the interrogation, keen to understand Michael's potential involvement in the case. They began by asking about his relationship with Callie and his whereabouts on the night of her murder. Michael stated that he had been at home, alone, reading a book about World War II, his favorite historical period. The detectives found his alibi weak and decided to dig deeper. They asked about his feelings for Callie and if he had any contact with her recently. Michael admitted that he still cared for Callie, but denied any recent interactions beyond professional encounters. He appeared calm but evasive when pressed for details, raising suspicions about his true involvement. In addition to questioning Michael, the detectives examined his personal and professional records. They discovered that Michael had a history of becoming overly involved in cases where he had personal connections. This tendency made his proximity to the investigation and his personal history with Callie more troubling. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the area around Callie's home on the night of the murder. While they did not find clear evidence placing Michael at the scene, his long-standing infatuation with Callie and his erratic behavior in similar past situations kept him on their radar. Throughout the investigation, Michael's colleagues and the community were divided in their opinions. Some viewed him as a dedicated officer who would never harm Callie, while others believed his unresolved feelings could have driven him to a desperate act. As the detectives continued to scrutinize Michael, they knew that they needed solid evidence to either confirm or rule out his involvement. His age and status made the case delicate, but the team remained committed to uncovering the truth behind Callie Carter's tragic death. As the investigation into Callie Carter's murder progressed, the police began to piece together crucial evidence pointing towards the true perpetrator. On June 15, 2004, a breakthrough came when they found incriminating evidence against James Carter, Callie's husband. James, a 36-year-old jobless man, had a troubled past marked by infidelity and erratic behavior. Callie had recently discovered his affair with Maureen's Afterpines, which further strained their already tumultuous marriage. Detectives uncovered that Callie had planned to leave James and expose his affair, threatening to cut off his financial support. Faced with the potential ruin of his leisurely lifestyle, James's desperation drove him to a breaking point. Further forensic analysis revealed that James's fingerprints were on the knife used to stab Callie multiple times. Additionally, fibers from his clothing matched those found at the chaotic crime scene. The branding of the letter Z on Callie's body, initially thought to be linked to Maureen's cult, was identified as a desperate attempt by James to divert suspicion towards Xenon philosophy. On the morning of June 16, 2004, under a clear blue Texas sky, the police moved to arrest James at his home, which was also the site of the murder. Detective Sarah Jenkins and Officer Mark Davis approached the house with a sense of urgency and caution. James opened the door, visibly agitated and disheveled. As she and Davis placed him in handcuffs, James's face turned pale and he protested loudly, but the overwhelming evidence left him with little room for denial. The news of James' arrests sent shockwaves through Galveston. Callie's family, who had been anxiously following the investigation, expressed a mix of relief and sorrow. Callie's mother, Margaret, tearfully thanked the police for their diligent work but lamented the tragic loss of her beloved daughter. The community, already shaken by the murder, grappled with the revelation that the crime was committed by someone so close to Callie. Friends and colleagues of Callie were stunned, finding it hard to reconcile the image of James as the loving husband with the brutal facts of the case. James' arrest marked a critical turning point in the investigation, bringing some closure to a grieving family and community. The focus now shifted to ensuring justice for Callie through the upcoming trial. James Carter's trial for the murder of Callie Carter began on September 1, 2005, in the Galveston County Courthouse. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Ramirez, 45, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp legal acumen, presented a compelling case against James. They detailed how his desperate attempt to silence Callie was driven by the fear of exposure and financial ruin. The prosecution's argument relied heavily on the forensic evidence. James' fingerprints on the murder weapon, the matching fibers, and the digital trail of messages and emails between James and Maureen's Afterpines. Ramirez painted a vivid picture of a man cornered by his own lies and infidelity, driven to commit an unthinkable act. In contrast, the defense, headed by attorney Ulcer Mitchum, 50, known for his smooth-talking style and high-profile case history, tried to cast doubt on the evidence. Mitchell argued that the investigation was biased from the start, influenced by the community's shock and grief. He suggested that the evidence was circumstantial and that the branding of the letter Z pointed more convincingly towards Zen and philosophy. The trial lasted for 3 intense weeks, with testimonies from forensic experts, character witnesses, and members of Xenon philosophy. The courtroom was filled with residents, journalists, and TV crews from stations like local ABC affiliate KTRK, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. On September 21, 2005, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and tears. James Carter showed little emotion as the verdict was read, his face a mask of resignation. The sentencing hearing followed swiftly. The judge handed down a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing the brutality of the crime and the betrayal of trust as key factors in her decision. The verdict and sentencing resonated deeply within the Galveston community. Some felt the punishment was just, reflecting the heinous nature of the crime. Others debated the fairness, given James' apparent lack of remorse and the complexities of the case. The trial's conclusion brought some closure, but also highlighted the deep scars left by the tragedy. Friends and colleagues of Callie continued to mourn her loss while trying to move forward, forever changed by the events that had transpired. In the months following the trial, the community of Galveston slowly began to heal from the tragedy of Callie Carter's murder. Life for many, however, was irrevocably changed. James Carter, now serving a life sentence without parole, faced the grim reality of his actions. In prison, he was known to be a solitary figure, rarely interacting with other inmates. Reports indicated that he spent most of his time in his cell, reflecting on the life he had destroyed. Maureen's Afterpines, the leader of Xenon philosophy, faced intense scrutiny following the trial. Though she was not directly involved in the murder, the revelations about her affair with James and the subsequent blackmailing of Callie tarnished her reputation. Membership dwindled as former followers questioned her teachings and integrity. Maureen stepped down from her leadership position and retreated from public life, leaving the future of the Xenon philosophy uncertain. Michael Lawson, the elderly police officer who had been a suspect, struggled to rebuild his reputation. Despite being cleared of any involvement in the murder, the investigation had taken a toll on his career and personal life. Michael retired from the police force and moved to El Paso, Texas, seeking peace and distance from the painful memories. The case of Callie Carter remained a somber chapter in Galveston's history, but it also served as a reminder of the importance of justice and the impact one person's life can have on a community. Through collective effort and remembrance, Galveston aimed to move forward while honoring Callie's legacy. In late July 2017, this is the story of Caroline Stevens, a dedicated pediatric nurse whose life was cut short by a sinister plot involving her husband and their foster daughter. Caroline Stevens was a 52-year-old pediatric nurse who lived in Corvallis, Oregon. Known for her kind heart and dedication to her work, Caroline was a beloved figure in her community. She had a special gift for connecting with children, something that made her a standout nurse at the Louisville Hospital, Good Samaritan Regional Medical Center. Caroline's colleagues often spoke about her compassion and patience. She was the nurse who would stay late to comfort a scared child or to talk with worried parents. Caroline had a unique perspective on life. As a former foster child, she knew the struggles that many children faced. This personal history drove her to help others, especially children and teens in the foster care system. She was actively involved in community programs and often volunteered at local shelters. Caroline's friends described her as nurturing and empathetic, always willing to lend a helping hand. Her home was often filled with laughter and the smell of homemade cookies, a testament to her love for baking. Caroline was married to Dr. Oliver Stevens, an entomologist at Oregon State University. They had been married for over 20 years and were well known in the community. They had no biological children, but they had fostered several over the years. Their most recent foster child was Charmin Briscoe, who had turned 18 just a few months before Caroline's death. Caroline was very close to Charmin, treating her as her own daughter and supporting her plans to attend Oregon State in the fall. In the days leading up to her death, Caroline was busy with her usual activities. She had just organized a small charity event at her church, St. Mary's Catholic Church, where she was a devoted member. Her friends recalled how excited she was about an upcoming summer picnic planned for the children in her care program. Caroline's diary entries from this time reflected her joy and anticipation for the future. She wrote about her dreams of continuing her work with children and perhaps even starting a small nonprofit organization dedicated to helping foster kids. Caroline's life was a beacon of hope and kindness, making her tragic end all the more shocking and mysterious for everyone who knew her. It was late at night on July 29, 2017, when the peaceful town of Corvallis was jolted by a horrifying discovery. Caroline Stevens' body was found in the backyard of her home. The time was around 10:30 p.m. The person who found her was a neighbor, Lisa Turner. Lisa had come over to return a casserole dish she had borrowed earlier in the week. As she approached the house, she noticed the back gate was open, which was unusual. Lisa decided to check if everything was all right. She walked into the backyard and found Caroline lying on the ground motionless. Caroline's body was partially hidden by the tall garden plants she had lovingly tended. Lisa's first reaction was shock. She dropped the dish and screamed, her voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. She quickly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking as she tried to explain what she had found. The emergency operator calmed Lisa down and got the necessary details. Lisa described how Caroline looked. She was covered in dirt and there was a rope around her neck. The operator assured Lisa that help was on the way and advised her to stay where she was but not to touch anything. Lisa, still in shock, sat on the back steps, trying to process what she had just seen. When the police and paramedics arrived, they found Lisa visibly shaken but able to give a statement. Officer Joey Martins, one of the first on the scene, described Lisa as pale and trembling, her voice barely a whisper as she recounted the events. The backyard was quickly cordoned off with yellow police tape as investigators began their work. Caroline's body was carefully examined. The medical examiner, Dr. Susan Ng, noted the severe head injuries and the strangulation marks on Caroline's neck. She confirmed that Caroline had been bludgeoned with a tire iron and then strangled with a rope. The scene was gruesome, with blood spatters on the garden pathway and the tire iron lying nearby, partially hidden under a bush. News of the murder spread quickly through Corvallis. People were shocked that something so terrible could happen in their quiet town. Friends and family gathered outside the Stevens home, comforting each other and trying to make sense of the tragedy. Caroline's death was a harsh blow to the community. She was a beloved figure, and the brutality of her murder left everyone in a state of disbelief and fear. The police promised to find out who was responsible for this heinous crime and bring them to justice. The police arrived quickly at the Stevens home on July 29, 2017. By 11:00 p.m., the quiet neighborhood of Corvallis was buzzing with activity. Officer Joey Martinez, along with Detective Linda Salina and Detective Mike Prosper, led the investigation. They were known for their thoroughness and dedication. Detective Salina, a 10-year veteran of the force, was especially known for her keen eye for detail. Detective Prosper, her partner, was equally experienced and meticulous. The crime scene was a mess. Caroline Stevens' body lay in the backyard, surrounded by her garden plants. Blood was splattered on the garden pathway, and a tire iron lay nearby, partially hidden under a bush. The rope around Caroline's neck was still tightly wound. The detectives immediately began to secure the area, putting up yellow police tape to keep curious neighbors and onlookers at a distance. Detective Salina took the lead in examining the body. She noted the severe head injuries and the clear marks of strangulation on Caroline's neck. It was evident that Caroline had been bludgeoned with the tire iron and then strangled with the rope. The brutality of the crime was shocking. Detective Salina carefully documented the scene, taking photographs and making notes. Detective Prosper focused on gathering evidence from the surrounding area. He collected the tire iron and bagged it for forensic analysis. He also took samples of the blood spatter and examined the rope for any potential clues. The backyard was meticulously combed for any signs that might point to the murderer. As the investigation continued, the police used various tools and methods to gather evidence. They brought in a forensic team to dust for fingerprints and collect DNA samples. The tire iron was sent to the lab for analysis to determine if it had any fingerprints or other trace evidence. The rope was also examined for fibers or hairs that might help identify the killer. By the early hours of July 30, the police had gathered a significant amount of evidence from the crime scene. Detective Salina and Detective Prosper reviewed their findings and began to piece together the events that led to Caroline's murder. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, and they knew they had to act quickly to find the murderer before they could strike again. The investigation was just beginning, but the detectives were determined to solve the case and bring justice for Caroline Stevens. The peaceful town of Corvallis was now the center of a major murder investigation, and the police were ready to uncover the truth. The first suspect the police investigated was Dr. Oliver Stevens, Caroline's husband. Dr. Stevens, 55, was an entomologist at Oregon State University. He studied insects and was well known in his field. To the outside world, he seemed like a mild-mannered and hardworking man. However, some in the community found him creepy. Oliver had a reputation for being distant and socially awkward. When the police arrived at Oliver's workplace to question him, he was in his lab, working late as usual. He seemed calm and cooperative. Oliver told the police he had been at work all day and only came home late in the evening. He claimed to have found the house empty and assumed Caroline was out visiting friends. Oliver's alibi was that he had been at the university the entire time, with colleagues who could confirm his presence. Detectives Salina and Prosper interviewed Oliver in the small, cluttered office at the university. Oliver appeared calm but showed little emotion when discussing his wife's death. He described his relationship with Caroline as good and normal. However, the detectives noticed that he avoided making direct eye contact and seemed uncomfortable when they asked about his personal life. The police were particularly interested in Oliver's recent behavior. They discovered that Oliver had married Charmin Briscoe, their former foster daughter, in a small ceremony just 6 days after Caroline's death. This raised so many red flags. Marrying so soon after his wife's brutal murder seemed extremely suspicious and definitely earned him the title of creepiest man in Oregon. Oliver calmly explained that he and Charmin had developed feelings for each other over time and that the marriage was their way to move forward after Caroline's death. The police pressed Oliver on this point, asking if Caroline knew about his relationship with Charmin. Oliver admitted that Caroline had recently become suspicious and had confronted him about it. He claimed that they had argued but insisted he had nothing to do with her death. Oliver's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he became visibly nervous when discussing his relationship with Charmin. Detective Salina found Oliver's behavior odd. Marrying so quickly after Caroline's death and his nervousness during the interrogation made him a prime suspect. However, they needed more evidence to link him directly to the murder. They decided to keep a close eye on him and continued to investigate other leads. As the investigation progressed, the detectives hoped to find more clues that would either confirm or dispel their suspicions about Dr. Oliver Stevens. His unusual behavior and rapid remarriage made him a key figure in the case, and the police were determined to uncover the truth. The second suspect the police investigated was Charmin Briscoe, the Stevens' former foster daughter and also Oliver Stevens' new wife. Charmin was 18 years old and had lived with Caroline and Oliver since she was 17. She had a troubled past, growing up with a violent alcoholic father. Despite these hardships, Charmin was an academically gifted student and had plans to attend Oregon State University in the fall. The police found Charmin packing up the small apartment that Oliver and Caroline had rented for her when she turned 18. Detective Linda Salina and Detective Mike Prosper visited her there to ask questions about Caroline's death. Charmin was quiet and reserved during the interview, traits her teachers and peers often mentioned. She appeared deeply affected by the events, but her answers were calm and straightforward. Charmin told the detectives about her relationship with Caroline, describing her as a kind and loving mother figure. She said Caroline had always supported her, especially in her academic pursuits. When asked about Oliver, Charmin admitted that they had developed feelings for each other and that Oliver had treated her to a lavish dinner at a fancy restaurant for her 18th birthday. It was during this dinner that Oliver confessed his love for her and said Caroline was just a nuisance. The police found it unusual that Charmin married Oliver just days after Caroline's death. Charmin explained that they were in love and wanted to move on with their lives. She insisted she had no involvement in Caroline's murder and that she had been at home studying on the night of the crime. Her alibi was that she had spent the evening alone, preparing for her upcoming university courses. Detective Selena noticed that Charmin's answers were consistent but sensed a lingering fear in her demeanor. Charmin seemed genuinely saddened by Caroline's death, but also appeared to be hiding something. The detectives asked Charmin about her thoughts on Oliver's behavior after Caroline's death. Charmin hesitated but then said Oliver had been supportive and caring, helping her through the difficult time. The police also asked Charmin if Caroline knew about her relationship with Oliver. Charmin said that Caroline had suspected something but had not confronted her directly. This information, combined with a rapid marriage, made Charmin a person of interest. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, the detectives had to consider other possibilities. As the interview concluded, the police remained cautious about Charmin's involvement. Her relationship with Oliver and her proximity to the Stevens family made her a key figure in the investigation. The detectives decided to monitor her closely while continuing to gather more information. The investigation into Charmin Briscoe's role in the case was ongoing, with detectives looking for any clues that could either confirm or disprove her involvement in Caroline Stevens' murder. The third suspect the police investigated was Samuel Manjaro, a 43-year-old refugee from South Sudan. Samuel had moved to America with his 4 children after losing his wife during the Civil War. He found work as a janitor and rented a small apartment in Corvallis. Samuel's connection to the Stevens family came from a dispute with Dr. Oliver Stevens, who was his former landlord. Samuel had been evicted from his apartment by Dr. Stevens just a month before Caroline's death. Oliver had given Samuel and his family very little notice, making room for Charmin Briscoe to live there rent-free. This eviction left Samuel and his children homeless for a short period, which caused him significant distress. The police considered Samuel a suspect because he had a motive for holding a grudge against Oliver. Detectives Linda Salina and Mike Prosper went to interview Samuel at his new apartment. Samuel was cooperative but visibly upset about the eviction. He spoke about the challenges of starting a new life in America and the hardship caused by losing his apartment. Samuel described how difficult it had been to find a new place to live while trying to keep his job and take care of his children. During the interview, Samuel appeared calm but frustrated when discussing Dr. Stevens. He admitted he was angry about the eviction but denied any involvement in Caroline's murder. Samuel explained that on the night of the murder, he was at work. His employer confirmed that Samuel had been working his usual night shift as a janitor at a local office building. The police checked Samuel's alibi and found it to be solid. His time card showed he had clocked in and out at the correct times, and security footage confirmed his presence at the building throughout the night. Despite his anger towards Oliver, there was no evidence linking Samuel to the crime scene. Detective Selena noticed that Samuel's main concern was the well-being of his children. He talked about how they were adjusting to life in Corvallis and his hopes for their future. Samuel was a hard-working man trying to provide for his family under challenging circumstances. His focus on his children and his solid alibi made it less likely that he was involved in Caroline's murder. After interviewing Samuel, the detectives concluded that while he had a motive to dislike Oliver, there was no direct evidence tying him to the crime. They decided to keep Samuel in mind, but turned their attention back to other leads that might provide more substantial clues. As the investigation continued, the police were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to Caroline Stevens. Samuel Mounjaro remained a person of interest, but the focus shifted back to the Stevens family and their complex relationships. On August 5, 2017, a week after Caroline Stevens' murder, the police received a crucial piece of new evidence. It was a hot and sunny afternoon when Detective Linda Salina got a call from the forensic lab. The lab had analyzed the tire iron found at the crime scene and discovered fingerprints that didn't belong to Caroline or Oliver. These fingerprints belonged to Charmin Briscoe. The police immediately revisited the Stevens home to gather more evidence. This time, they brought in a specialized team to search for anything that might have been overlooked. Detective Mike Prosper led the team, and they meticulously combed through the house and backyard. They focused on areas where Charmin might have left traces of her presence. During the search, they found a hidden compartment in the garage. Inside, there were several personal items belonging to Charmin, including a notebook. This notebook contained detailed entries about her sexual relationship with Oliver and her growing frustration with Caroline. One entry, dated just days before the murder, expressed anger towards Caroline for being a nasty bleep and mentioned a plan to make that bleep pay. The notebook was a significant find. It provided a direct link between Charmin and the murder. The police also found a pair of gloves in Charmin's apartment, which tested positive for traces of Caroline's blood. This evidence suggested that Charmin had worn the gloves while handling the tire iron, which explained why her fingerprints were only found on the weapon and not at the crime scene. With this new evidence, the police called Charmin in for another round of questioning. This time, they confronted her with the notebook and the blood-stained gloves. Charmin's demeanor changed drastically. She became visibly nervous and struggled to maintain her composure. She initially denied any involvement, but the mounting evidence made it difficult for her to keep her story straight. Charmin eventually broke down and confessed to being present at the crime scene, but insisted that Oliver was the one who had killed Caroline. She claimed that she had tried to stop him, but was too scared to report the crime. Charmin's confession added a new layer to the investigation, indicating that Oliver and Charmin might have been co-conspirators. The police reviewed Charmin's confession and the new evidence carefully. They realized that while Charmin's involvement was now clear, they still needed to determine Oliver's exact role in the murder. The focus of the investigation shifted to proving Oliver's participation and understanding the full extent of their plan. As the investigation progressed, the police were more determined than ever to bring justice for Caroline Stevens. The new evidence provided a clearer picture of what had happened, but the case was far from over. The detectives knew they had to keep pushing to uncover the whole truth. On August 10, 2017, the police felt they had enough evidence to arrest Dr. Oliver Stevens for the murder of his wife, Caroline. Dr. Stevens, 55, was a respected entomologist at Oregon State University, but behind his professional facade, he harbored dark secrets. Oliver had married Charmin Briscoe, their former foster daughter, just 6 days after Caroline's brutal murder, raising many suspicions. Detectives Linda Salina and Mike Prosper reviewed the new evidence carefully. Charmin's confession, the blood-stained gloves, and the notebook entries all pointed towards a conspiracy between Oliver and Charmin. They believed that Oliver orchestrated the murder to be with Charmin without any obstacles. Caroline had recently become suspicious of Oliver's behavior, which likely pushed him to act. On the morning of August 11, the police planned the arrest. They knew Oliver was teaching a class at the university, so they decided to confront him there. At 10 o'clock a.m., Detectives Salina and Prosper arrived at the campus. They waited outside his lecture hall until he finished his class. As Oliver exited the room, the detectives approached him, identified themselves, and informed him that he was under arrest for the murder of Caroline Stevens. Oliver's reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. He tried to maintain his composure but couldn't hide his surprise. The students and faculty nearby were equally shocked as they watched the arrest unfold. The detectives handcuffed Oliver and read him his rights. He was then escorted to the police car, maintaining a stoic expression throughout the process. Back at the police station, Oliver was formally charged with first-degree murder. During the interrogation, he continued to deny his involvement, claiming that Charman had acted alone. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The notebook entries, Charman's confession, and the forensic evidence all painted a clear picture of his guilt. The police believed that Oliver had manipulated Charman into helping him with his plan, using her troubled past and emotional attachment to him. The detectives continued to piece together the events leading up to the murder. They learned that Oliver had meticulously planned the crime, ensuring that Charman would have an alibi and that evidence would point away from him initially. His cold and calculated approach made the crime even more chilling. With Oliver in custody, the police shifted their focus to preparing for the upcoming trial. They were determined to ensure that both Oliver and Charman would face the consequences of their actions. The arrest was a significant step towards justice for Caroline Stevens, but the case was far from over. The trial for the murder of Caroline Stevens began on November 15, 2017. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and members of Caroline's family. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Margaret Ellis, 45, presented a strong case against Dr. Oliver Stevens. Margaret was known for her meticulous approach and her passion for seeking justice. She argued that Oliver had orchestrated the murder to be with Charman Briscoe, their former foster daughter, without any obstacles. The prosecution laid out the evidence in a clear and compelling manner. They presented the notebook entries written by Charman, which detailed her frustrations with Caroline and hinted at a plan to make that bleep pay. They also showed the blood-stained gloves found in Charman's apartment and the forensic analysis that linked them to Caroline's murder. Margaret emphasized Oliver's quick marriage to Charman just days after the murder, portraying it as proof of his motive. The defense, led by attorney Jonathan Ray, 50, faced an uphill battle. Jonathan was a seasoned lawyer known for his calm demeanor and strategic thinking. He argued that Charman acted alone out of jealousy and that Oliver had no part in the crime. The defense attempted to discredit Charman's confession, suggesting that she had been coerced by the police. Jonathan also tried to cast doubt on the forensic evidence, claiming that it was circumstantial and did not directly link Oliver to the murder. Caroline's family watched the trial with a mix of grief and determination. Her brother, David Miller, often spoke to reporters during breaks, expressing hope that justice would be served. The emotional toll on the family was evident as they listened to the details of Caroline's brutal death. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On December 10, 2017, they returned with a verdict. Oliver Stevens was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Oliver remained stoic, showing little reaction. Charman, who was also present, broke down in tears. The judge sentenced Oliver to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The severity of the sentence reflected the heinous nature of the crime and the premeditation involved. Charman received a lighter sentence of 25 years for her role in the murder, acknowledging her cooperation with the police. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Caroline's family, though the pain of her loss remained. They felt justice had been served, but the memories of Caroline would always linger. The community of Corvallis was shocked by the events, but many were relieved that the case had been resolved. The trial and its outcome had a profound impact on those involved. Caroline's friends and family found some solace in the verdict, while Oliver and Charman faced the consequences of their actions. The story of Caroline Stevens' murder served as a reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the importance of seeking justice. After the trial, life in Corvallis began to settle into a new normal, though the impact of the case lingered for everyone involved. Dr. Oliver Stevens was serving his life sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary. The prison, located in Salem, became his new home, where he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Oliver's former colleagues and students at Oregon State University were shocked and saddened by his conviction. The university had to manage the fallout from the scandal, including addressing concerns from students and faculty about their safety and the integrity of their institution. Charman Briscoe, sentenced to 25 years, was transferred to the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, a women's prison near Wilsonville. Charman's life in prison was difficult. She faced challenges adapting to her new environment and had to cope with the consequences of her actions. The media continued to follow her story, and she became a figure of public interest, often highlighted in local news reports. For the Stevens friends and supporters, the case became a rallying point for greater awareness and support for victims of crime. Various memorials and events were held in Caroline's honor, helping to keep her memory alive and ensure that her legacy of compassion and service continued. As time went on, life in Corvallis gradually returned to its normal pace, but the story of Caroline Stevens and the dramatic events surrounding her murder remained a significant part of the town's history. The trial and its outcome served as a stark reminder of the importance of justice and the impact of crime on individuals and communities alike. Carol McMillan was a 48-year-old with big dreams and a loving family in Shaker Heights, Ohio. She was well known in the community for her friendly nature and warm smile. Carol was the kind of person who would always stop to chat with neighbors and was happy to lend a hand when needed. She was active in the local community, often volunteering at church events and organizing neighborhood barbecues. Carol's friendly nature made her well-liked by everyone she met. Carol lived in a charming, two-story home on a tree-lined street in Shaker Heights, a suburb of Cleveland known for its beautiful architecture and strong sense of community. Shaker Heights is often described as having a boho chic vibe, with its famously liberal politics, mix of old and new homes, local coffee shops, and vibrant art scene. Carol's home was filled with family photos, cozy furniture, and a kitchen that always smelled like freshly baked cookies. She loved cooking and was known for her famous chocolate chip cookies, which she often brought to work or shared with neighbors. Carol was married to Daniel McMillan, a man 16 years her junior. Despite the age difference, Carol and Daniel appeared to be a happy couple. Daniel worked for a health insurance company and was often busy with work, but the couple made time for each other. They had been married for 5 years and lived with Carol's daughter from a previous marriage, 19-year-old Sarah Levinsky McMillan. Sarah was a bright and ambitious college student studying pre-med and had dreams of becoming a doctor. Carol was proud of her daughter and supported her in every way she could. In the weeks leading up to her death, Carol was planning a family vacation to Orlando. She was excited about the trip and talked about it constantly. She had recently purchased a new suitcase and was filling it with summer clothes, sunscreen, and a new pair of sandals. Carol loved spending time with her family and couldn't wait for the getaway. But Carol's excitement would forever be cut short when, on the morning of April 17, 2019, she was found dead in her home. On the morning of April 17, 2019, Shaker Heights was just waking up. It was a cool, overcast day, typical of spring in Ohio. The neighborhood was quiet, with only a few early risers out walking their dogs or grabbing their morning coffee from Starbucks. Carol McMillan had always been an early bird, but that day something was wrong. At around 8:30 a.m., Sarah Levinsky McMillan, Carol's 19-year-old daughter, went downstairs to the kitchen. She found her mother lying on the floor, unresponsive. A can of Carol's favorite drink, and America's as well, Diet Pepsi, was spilled beside her, the sugary sweet liquid slowly seeping into the grate between the tiles. Panicked, Sarah screamed and immediately called 911, her hands shaking as she dialed. The dispatcher's voice tried to calm her down, but Sarah was too overwhelmed. She was crying and begging for someone to come quickly. When the paramedics arrived just minutes later, they found Sarah in shock, pacing back and forth in the living room. The house was eerily quiet except for the sound of the 911 call still echoing from Sarah's phone on the kitchen counter. The paramedics rushed to Carol's side, but it was too late. Carol was declared dead at the scene. Sarah couldn't believe what was happening. Just the day before, her mother had been excitedly talking about their upcoming vacation, picking out outfits and making plans. Now she was gone, and Sarah was left feeling lost and confused. As the paramedics worked, Sarah called her stepfather, Daniel McMillan, who was at work at the time. Daniel's reaction was hysterical. He immediately started wailing, almost screaming, as Sarah sobbed into the phone. He told her he would leave work right away, but he sounded almost insane with grief. The Shaker Heights Police Department was quick to respond to the scene at the McMillan residence. Detective Laura Robacek, who had been with the department for over 15 years, led the investigation. Robacek was known for her sharp eye and methodical approach. She had a reputation for solving even the most challenging cases. When she arrived at the scene on the morning of April 17, 2019, she immediately sensed something was off. The McMillan home was a typical, well-kept suburban house, with a neat lawn and flower bed starting to bloom with the first signs of spring. Inside, the house was clean and organized. The only sign of anything out of the ordinary was the sight of Carol McMillan's lifeless body on the kitchen floor. Next to her was a spilled can of Diet Pepsi, America's nostalgic drink favorite, its silky brown contents pooling around her. Detective Robacek and her team began their work by securing the crime scene. Yellow tape was quickly put up around the perimeter of the house, and officers were stationed at the entrance to keep onlookers and neighbors at a distance. The investigators carefully examined the kitchen. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be out of place. Carol's purse was on the counter, untouched, and the back door was locked from the inside. The teen noticed that the can of Diet Pepsi was still relatively full, with only a small amount spilled on the floor. This caught Robotchek's attention. She instructed the crime scene unit to collect the can as evidence, along with the remaining liquid. The team also took samples from the kitchen counter and floor to test for any unusual substances. They photographed the scene from every angle, documenting every detail. An autopsy was ordered to determine the exact cause of Carol's death. The paramedics on the scene had suspected a heart attack, but Robotchek wasn't so sure. There was something about the way Carol was positioned, and the fact that she had been drinking her favorite soda, or pop as they call it in the Midwest, just moments before, that made Robotchek suspicious. As the investigation continued, the detectives combed through the house for more clues. They searched Carol's personal belongings, looking for anything that might suggest foul play. Her phone was also taken as evidence, with the intention of checking her recent calls and messages. Detective Robotchek knew this case would require careful examination. There was more, much more, to Carol's death than met the eye. With Carol McMillan's death under investigation, the police turned their attention to the people closest to her. The first person they questioned was her husband, Daniel McMillan. At 32 years old, Daniel was much younger than Carol. He worked for a health insurance company in Cleveland and had a reputation for being handsome, charming, and successful. He seemed to have everything: a stable job, a nice home, and a wonderful family. But as detectives began to dig deeper, they uncovered a different side of Daniel. Daniel had met Carol 6 years earlier when he was working as a junior analyst at the insurance company. Carol, a widow at the time, had been charmed by his youthful energy and confidence. They married a year later, and Daniel became a stepfather to Carol's daughter, Sarah, then 13. On the surface, their marriage seemed solid, but friends noticed that Daniel had become more distant from Carol in the past year. He spent longer hours at work, often coming home late or claiming he had to travel for business. During his first interview with the police, Daniel appeared calm, even cold. He expressed shock over Carol's death, but his emotions seemed muted. He told Detective Laura Robotchek that he had been at work when it happened and had rushed home as soon as Sarah called him. When asked about his relationship with Carol, Daniel claimed that they had a good marriage, though he admitted they had grown apart over time. He insisted that he had nothing to do with her death and had no idea why anyone would want to harm her. However, as the interview continued, Detective Robotchek's suspicions grew. Daniel was too composed, too controlled. When asked about Carol's plans, Daniel was vague, saying he was a feminist and didn't like to keep track of his wife's day-to-day activities. He also couldn't recall the last time they had a meaningful conversation or had sex together as a couple. Robotchek found it odd that Daniel, who claimed to love his wife, seemed so disconnected from her life. The detectives also noticed inconsistencies in Daniel's statements. For instance, he mentioned that he knew about Carol's and America's favorite drink, Diet Pepsi, yet he couldn't explain why there was a half-empty can next to her body when she was found. He claimed Carol drank soda often but didn't seem to know much about her other habits or routines. As the police continued to question Daniel, they began to consider his potential motive. Could Daniel have wanted out of the marriage, or was there something else, something darker, driving him? The investigation into Daniel's life revealed that he had been keeping secrets. One of the most shocking was his sexual obsession with his stepdaughter, Sarah. This revelation gave the police a new angle to pursue. If Daniel was in love with Sarah, it could explain why he might want Carol out of the way. But proving that Daniel was involved in Carol's death would require much more evidence. Detective Robotchek knew they had to be thorough, carefully piecing together the puzzle that was starting to form. The next person the police investigated was Sarah Levinsky McMillan, Carol's 19-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Sarah was a bright and driven young woman who was well on her way to becoming a doctor. She was a pre-med student at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, where she had earned a scholarship for her academic excellence. Sarah was known for her kindness and dedication to her studies, often volunteering at local hospitals and tutoring fellow underprivileged students, a common pastime in Shaker Heights in her free time. Sarah had always looked up to her mother, seeing Carol as a role model of strength and compassion. The two were incredibly close, often spending weekends together shopping, watching movies, or just talking about life snuggled in bed together. Carol had been Sarah's biggest supporter, especially after the death of Sarah's biological father when she was just a child. The loss had forged an incredibly strong bond between mother and daughter, making Carol's sudden death all the more devastating for Sarah. When the police first approached Sarah, she was visibly distraught. The grief of losing her mother was compounded by the shock of finding her dead corpse. Sarah told the detectives that she had been studying for an upcoming biology exam when she decided to take a break and grab a snack. She went to the kitchen and found her mother on the floor, unresponsive, with a can of Diet Pepsi nearby. In a panic, Sarah called 911, hoping against hope that it wasn't too late. During the interview, Sarah was cooperative but deeply emotional. She described her mother's recent mood as happy and content, with no signs of stress or unhappiness. Sarah couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm Carol, describing her mother as someone who was loved by everyone who knew her. The police asked Sarah about her relationship with Daniel, her stepfather, and Sarah spoke highly of him, saying that he was, quote, a hottie and that she saw him as a supportive father figure. She was completely unaware of his secret sexual obsession with her, a fact that made the police even more concerned and somewhat suspicious. As detectives delved deeper into Sarah's life, they found nothing to suggest she had any involvement in her mother's death. Her alibi checked out. Sarah had been in her room, engrossed in her studies, at the time of the murder. Her social media activity showed a typical college student's life, with posts about school, friends, liberal political causes, and upcoming exams. There were no signs of any secret relationships or troubling behavior. However, the police were still suspicious of the dynamics within the McMillan household. They wondered if Sarah could have been an unknowing pawn in Daniel's plan. If Daniel's sexual obsession with Sarah was as intense as they suspected, it could mean that Sarah was in danger too. But for now, there was no evidence linking Sarah to the crime, leaving detectives to focus their attention elsewhere. The third person the police questioned was Jessica Miller, Carol's closest friend and confidant. Jessica, 45, was a real estate agent who had known Carol for over a decade. The two women had bonded over their shared experiences as working women in Shaker Heights and had become inseparable over the years. Jessica was often seen at Carol's home, helping with community events or just sharing a glass of wine in the evenings. To those who knew them, their friendship seemed unbreakable, a bond built on trust and mutual respect. However, the police soon discovered that Jessica had been keeping a significant secret. Despite her outward loyalty to Carol, Jessica had been having an affair with Daniel McMillan. This revelation came as a shock to everyone who knew the trio, especially given Jessica's deep friendship with Carol. According to Jessica, the affair began about a year before Carol's death. She claimed that it started innocently, with Daniel coming alone to one of Jessica's infamous naked hot tub parties. A few flirtatious comments, later things quickly escalated into a full-blown sexual relationship. Jessica admitted to feeling, quote, a little bleeping guilty about betraying her friend, but said she couldn't resist Daniel's, quote, smoking hot bod. When the police interviewed Jessica, she was nervous and defensive. She knew that her affair with Daniel placed her under suspicion, but she insisted that she had nothing to do with Carol's death. Jessica claimed that she was kind of saddened by Carol's passing and had even considered lowering the number of times she had sex per week with Daniel because of the guilt she felt. However, she also revealed that Daniel had recently told her he was in love with someone else and dumping, leaving her devastated. Jessica didn't know who the other woman was, but she suspected it might be someone younger, possibly Sarah. The detectives pressed Jessica for more details about her sexual relationship with Daniel and her whereabouts on the day of Carol's death. Jessica stated that she had been at a real estate showing in Cleveland Heights and had clients who could verify her alibi. The police followed up on this, confirming that Jessica was indeed with clients at the time of the murder. However, they couldn't ignore the possibility that Jessica might have been involved in some way, given her emotional turmoil and jealousy over Daniel's shifting affections. Despite her alibi, Jessica remained a person of interest in the investigation. Her affair with Daniel, coupled with her close relationship with Carol, made her a complicated figure in the case. The police had to consider whether Jessica's jealousy and heartbreak might have driven her to do something drastic. But without concrete evidence linking her to the crime, Jessica was left in a precarious position, caught between her guilt over the affair and her sorrow over losing her friend. On April 27, 2019, just after 9:00 a.m., the weather in Shaker Heights was cool and overcast, typical for an Ohio spring. As investigators continued to search for clues, they received a significant break in the case. A toxicology report came back from the lab, revealing that Carol McMillan's cause of death was cyanide poisoning. The lethal substance had been mixed into her can of Diet Pepsi, confirming that her death was not a natural occurrence but a deliberate act of murder. The revelation of cyanide as the murder weapon shocked the investigation team. Cyanide is a rare and deadly poison, often associated with high-profile cases and espionage. The detectives knew they were dealing with a premeditated crime. Someone had gone to great lengths to plan and execute Carol's murder. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation, giving the police a clearer direction. The detectives immediately revisited the crime scene, searching for any trace of the poison or how it might have been introduced into Carol's drink. They examined the Diet Pepsi can, the surrounding area in the kitchen, and any containers or objects that might have come into contact with the poison. Forensic experts were called in to analyze everything, from the remnants of the drink to the fingerprints on the can. While no direct trace of cyanide was found in the kitchen, the forensic team did find traces of the poison on the rim of the can, confirming that it had been deliberately laced with the deadly substance. The discovery raised more questions. Who had access to the poison, and how did they get it into Carol's drink without her noticing? The police began to dig into the backgrounds of all the suspects, searching for any history of chemical knowledge or access to dangerous substances. They also looked into recent purchases and online searches that might indicate someone had been researching or acquiring cyanide. The detectives knew that cyanide was not something easily obtained. Whoever had used it had likely done some serious planning. This new evidence also put pressure on the suspects. The police re-interviewed them, focusing on their knowledge of poisons and any suspicious behavior leading up to Carol's death. The detectives were determined to find out who had the means and motive to commit such a calculated crime. With the case now pointing definitively to murder, the investigation took on a new urgency as they closed in on the truth. On April 20, 2019, just before noon, the police made a breakthrough in the investigation that would lead them directly to the murderer. After carefully examining the evidence and re-interviewing the suspects, the detectives had begun to piece together a disturbing picture. All signs pointed to Daniel McMillan, Carol's husband, as the one responsible for her death. Daniel McMillan, 32, was a charming and successful man who worked at a health insurance company. Outwardly, he appeared to have it all: a stable job, a beautiful wife, and a picture-perfect life in the progressive utopia of Shaker Heights. However, beneath the surface, Daniel was a man driven by dark and twisted sexual desires. He had become obsessed sexually with Carol's daughter and his stepdaughter, Sarah Levinsky McMillan, from her previous marriage. Daniel had secretly harbored sexual feelings for Sarah, who was only 19 and completely unaware of his intentions. As his obsession grew, Daniel became increasingly distant from Carol, seeing her as an obstacle to his disturbing fantasy of starting a new life with Sarah as his bride. Detectives uncovered key evidence that tied Daniel to the crime. An analysis of his internet search history revealed that he had been researching cyanide for several months before Carol's death. He had searched for information on where to buy it, how to use it, and its effects on the human body. This damning evidence suggested that Daniel had carefully planned the murder, intending to use cyanide to get rid of Carol without leaving a trace. On the day of the murder, Daniel had taken advantage of Carol's daily routine. He knew that she loved Diet Pepsi and drank a can every day after work. According to the investigation, Daniel had spiked her can of Diet Pepsi with cyanide, knowing that she would drink it as soon as she got home. The poison worked quickly, causing Carol to collapse and die within minutes. Daniel's plan was to make it look like a sudden heart attack, but the toxicology report revealed the truth. The police confronted Daniel with the evidence they had gathered. At first, he tried to maintain his innocence, but as the detectives laid out the facts, his internet searches, his growing obsession with Sarah, and the traces of cyanide on the can, Daniel's facade began to crumble. Daniel's arrest shocked the Shaker Heights community. Carol's friends and neighbors were horrified to learn that the man they had once thought of as a devoted husband had committed such a heinous act. Sarah was devastated by the revelation, struggling to come to terms with the fact that the man she had considered a father figure had been secretly plotting against her mother. The trial of Daniel McMillan began on January 15, 2019, in Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. The case drew significant media attention, with local news channels covering the proceedings extensively. Carol McMillan's murder had shocked the Shaker Heights community, and many people were eager to see justice served. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney James Leakey, 45, was known for his thorough and determined approach to criminal cases. Leakey presented a strong case against Daniel McMillan. He argued that Daniel had planned Carol's murder with premeditation, pointing to the evidence of cyanide found in Carol's Diet Pepsi and Daniel's extensive internet searches about the poison. Leakey described Daniel's actions as cold and calculated, emphasizing how Daniel's obsession with Sarah Levinsky McMillan drove him to commit the crime. On the other side, Daniel's defense attorney, Laura Phillips, 38, tried to paint a different picture. Phillips argued that Daniel was a man who had been overwhelmed by personal problems and stress, which might have affected his judgment. She claimed that Daniel's actions were not premeditated but a result of mental instability. Phillips tried to argue that there was not enough direct evidence linking Daniel to the poisoning, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. During the trial, Carol's family, including Sarah, attended each day, visibly emotional and distressed. Sarah was particularly affected by the trial, having to confront the reality of her stepfather's betrayal and her mother's death. The court saw tearful testimonies from friends and colleagues of Carol, who described her as a loving and caring person who would never have imagined such a violent end. After several days of testimony and evidence presentation, the jury deliberated and returned a verdict on January 22, 2019. Daniel McMillan was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with a mix of relief and sorrow by Carol's family and friends. They felt that while justice had been served, the pain of losing Carol and the betrayal like Daniel would linger. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, but it left a lasting impact on those involved. Carol's friends and family had to cope with the aftermath of the trial, trying to rebuild their lives while remembering the warmth and kindness Carol had brought into their lives. The trial was a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most seemingly perfect facades. After Daniel McMillan's trial and sentencing, life in Shaker Heights began to return to normal. But the impact of the case was still deeply felt by those involved. The McMillan family was forever changed, and the community was left grappling with the aftermath of the crime. Daniel McMillan was transferred to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, where he began serving his life sentence. His trial had been highly publicized, and he became a known figure in the prison system. His imprisonment was a stark contrast to the life of luxury he had once enjoyed. The media coverage of his case continued for some time, with many local news outlets reporting on his adjustment to prison life and his interactions with other inmates. Sarah Levinsky McMillan, Carol's daughter, faced a challenging road ahead. She was a pre-med student at the time of her mother's death and had been deeply affected by the murder. After the trial, Sarah took a leave from school to focus on her mental health and process the trauma of the past months. She received support from friends, family, and professional counselors. Her community rallied around her, and many people admired her resilience and strength during such a difficult time. Jessica Miller, Carol's former friend and Daniel's secret lover, also had to navigate the consequences of the case. Although she was cleared of any involvement in the murder, the affair and the role she played in Daniel's life made her a controversial figure. Jessica's real estate business suffered due to the negative publicity. She decided to move to a different city to start over, hoping to leave the past behind and rebuild her career and personal life. As time went on, Carol's friends and family worked to find a sense of normalcy. They focused on remembering her in positive ways and continuing the community work she had been passionate about. The case served as a harsh reminder of how quickly a life can be upended by betrayal and violence, leaving lasting scars on everyone involved. Bobby Nurtek, aged 52, was an ambitious and driven real estate developer. Known for his charismatic personality and charming demeanor, he built a successful career constructing McMansions in the desert north of Los Angeles. Bobby's life was filled with contradictions. On one hand, he was a successful businessman, admired by many for his achievements. On the other hand, he was a lonely soul, seeking solace in the vast desert landscape that surrounded his property. Despite his many professional accomplishments, Bobby's personal life was marked by tumultuous relationships and betrayals. Living like a recluse in his multi-million-dollar ranch, Bobby yearned for stability and genuine connections. He often sought solace in the vast expanse of the Mojave Desert, finding peace in the solitude it offered. His sprawling estate, nestled amidst the arid landscape, was a testament to his wealth and influence. In November of 2002, Bobby's life took a tragic turn. Rumors swirled in the tight-knit community of Lancaster, with whispers of infidelity, financial troubles, and resentful business partners. Bobby's relationships were a constant source of turmoil. He and his ex-wife, Eliza, had just finished their bitter divorce proceedings. The local newspaper, the Lancaster Gazette, published a series of articles highlighting his rise to prominence and the controversies that surrounded him. We will dive deeper into the events leading up to Bobby's murder, exploring the motives and suspects involved. Stay tuned as we uncover the truth behind this tragic crime. On a fateful day in November 2002, tragedy struck the quiet town of Lancaster, California. The lifeless body of Bobby Nurtek, a prominent real estate developer, was found in the stable of his multi-million-dollar ranch. The news of his untimely demise sent shockwaves through the community, leaving friends and family in a state of disbelief. The discovery of Bobby Nurtek's body was made by his close friend, Jason Harris Packard, who had come to visit him at his sprawling ranch. As Jason entered the stable, he was met with a scene of horror. Bobby lay motionless on the ground, a single bullet wound piercing his heart. The silence that filled the air was deafening, as if the world had come to a standstill. Immediately overcome with grief, Jason frantically dialed 911, desperately hoping that help would arrive in time. The authorities were alerted, and within minutes, the tranquil ranch was transformed into a crime scene. Police cars lined the driveway, their flashing lights illuminating the darkness that had descended upon the once serene landscape. News of the murder quickly spread, capturing the attention of the local media. Television crews from KTLA and KCBS set up their cameras, reporting live from the scene. As investigators meticulously combed through the evidence, the community was left grappling with shock and fear. How could such a tragedy befall someone like Bobby Nurtek, a man who had seemingly achieved the American dream? Rumors and speculation ran rampant as whispers of jealousy, greed, and betrayal filled the air. The days that followed were filled with interviews, interrogations, and painstaking analysis of every piece of evidence. The police were determined to bring the perpetrator to justice, to provide closure for Bobby's loved ones, and restore a sense of security to the community. In the aftermath of the shocking murder of Bobby Nurtek, the police wasted no time in their pursuit of justice. Led by the determined detective Laura Cordoba-Utica, the investigation team arrived at the crime scene with a sense of urgency. The once pristine and sprawling ranch, nestled in the desert north of Los Angeles, now stood as a haunting backdrop to the heinous crime that had taken place. As the investigators entered the property, they were met with a scene of devastation and despair. Bloodstains, like dark and ominous brushstrokes, painted a grim picture of the violence that had unfolded. Each droplet of blood told a story of the struggle that Bobby Nurtek had endured in his final moments. The investigators meticulously documented every detail, ensuring that no piece of evidence went unnoticed. The police team methodically combed through the ranch, searching for any clues that could lead them to the identity of the killer. They carefully examined every room, every nook and cranny, in their quest for the truth. The air was thick with tension as they meticulously collected fingerprints, DNA samples, and any other potential evidence that could help solve the case. Outside the ranch, the investigators discovered a gun in a nearby gully. The weapon, a cold and deadly instrument, held the key to unlocking the mystery behind Bobby Nurtek's untimely demise. It was carefully bagged and tagged, ready to be sent to the forensic lab for analysis. As the investigation unfolded, the police reached out to the media for assistance. News outlets, such as the local Lancaster Gazette and the Los Angeles Times, reported on the case, urging anyone with information to come forward. The community was gripped with fear and curiosity, eager to see justice served for the beloved real estate developer. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek took a dramatic turn when the focus shifted to his ex-wife, Eliza Nurtek. Eliza, age 38, was a marketing consultant in the San Fernando Valley and had a history of manipulative behavior. The police, armed with this information, began to dig deeper into her life, hoping to uncover any potential motive for the heinous crime. Eliza and Bobby's marriage was far from picture perfect. Their tumultuous, decade-long relationship was marred by accusations of infidelity and betrayal. Bobby had claimed that Eliza had cheated on him numerous times, leaving him feeling hurt and betrayed. These allegations were further compounded by Eliza's manipulative nature, which Bobby had often pointed out. The police believed that these factors could have driven Eliza to commit such a heinous act. Detective Laura Cortabiutica, the lead investigator on the case, wasted no time in interrogating Eliza. The questioning took place in a small, dimly lit room, with the tension palpable in the air. Eliza, dressed in a stylish pantsuit, maintained her composure as she vehemently denied any involvement in Bobby's murder. In an unexpected twist, Eliza retaliated by accusing Bobby of infidelity. She claimed that he had cheated on her multiple times with both men and women. These accusations added fuel to the already intense investigation, as the police now had to consider the possibility of a crime of passion. The media quickly caught wind of this sensational revelation, and blog posts by true crime fanatics began to speculate on the motives behind the murder. As the investigation continued, the police delved into Eliza's background. They discovered that she had a penchant for manipulation and had a reputation for being cunning. Eliza's clients, who had worked with her in the past, spoke of her ability to twist situations to her advantage and manipulate those around her. These insights into Eliza's character only deepened the suspicion surrounding her involvement in Bobby's murder. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek was far from over, and the police were determined to uncover the truth. As they sifted through the evidence and interviewed witnesses, they hoped to find the missing pieces that would lead them to the killer. The investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek took an unexpected turn when the police turned their attention to Jason Harris Packard, Bobby's business partner and close friend. Jason, aged 48, was known for his ambitious nature and ruthless approach to business. He and Bobby had a complicated relationship marked by both friendship and conflict. Jason's involvement in the murder investigation raised eyebrows due to his proximity to the victim. Rumors circulated that they were not only business partners, but also had a close personal relationship, so close that they even slept together in the same bed. Speculations about their alleged sexual involvement added another layer of complexity to the case. The police interrogated Jason, hoping to uncover any possible motive for his involvement in the crime. They questioned him about his financial disputes with Bobby and the nature of their relationship. Jason, torn between grief and suspicion, vehemently denied any participation in a sexual relationship with Bobby or in the murder. To gather more information, the investigators delved into Jason's background. They discovered that he had a reputation for being cutthroat in his business dealings, always striving for financial success. They also found evidence of previous clashes between Jason and Bobby over financial matters, further fueling their suspicions. The police meticulously examined Jason's alibi for the night of the murder. They interviewed his friends, colleagues, and neighbors, trying to establish his whereabouts. They searched for any inconsistencies or witnesses who could provide crucial information. Despite the mounting evidence against Jason, the investigation remained ongoing. The police were determined to leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of the truth. They continued to gather witness statements, analyze forensic evidence, and explore alternative theories. In the riveting investigation into the murder of Bobby Nurtek, shocking revelations have come to light that expose a web of deceit and corruption. As the police delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a sinister truth about his real estate dealings and the subpar materials used in his McMansions. These revelations have sent shockwaves through the community of Lancaster, California, where the tragic events unfolded in November of 2002. During the investigation, a devastating incident occurred that shed light on the true nature of Bobby Nurtek's real estate empire. The McPherson family, residents of one of the subdivisions he built, tragically lost their lives when the walls of their home collapsed while they slept. This horrifying event prompted the police to dig deeper into Bobby's business practices and construction methods. It was soon revealed that Bobby's real estate dealings were far from legitimate. The investigation uncovered a trail of dirty money flowing through his business transactions, raising suspicions of money laundering. This shocking revelation left the community in disbelief, as Bobby had been seen as a successful and respected figure in the world of real estate. Furthermore, it was discovered that the McMansions Bobby constructed were built using substandard materials. The investigation revealed that corners had been cut, compromising the safety and integrity of these homes. The use of inferior materials put the lives of the residents at risk, as evidenced by the tragic fate of the McPherson family. The community was left reeling from the realization that their dream homes were built on a foundation of deception. As news of these revelations spread, media outlets picked up the story, further amplifying the shock and outrage. Headlines blared with phrases like, "Real estate tycoon's dark secrets exposed," and "Lancaster scandal rocks community." The scandal surrounding Bobby Nurtek's murder had transformed into a larger narrative of corruption and betrayal. The police, faced with this new evidence, expanded their investigation to include not only the murder, but also the financial crimes and building code violations committed by Bobby Nurtek. The community demanded justice for the lives lost and the deception that had been perpetrated on them. The investigation took an unexpected turn when the police uncovered the lifeless body of Lucy Colligard, Bobby Nurtek's girlfriend, in her small apartment in Lancaster, California. Lucy, a struggling actress with dreams of making it big in Hollywood, had a troubled past filled with failed relationships and a history of substance abuse. The police, led by Detective Laura Cordobiutica, immediately began piecing together the events leading up to Lucy's death. They meticulously combed through her apartment, searching for any clues that could shed light on what happened. The walls were adorned with posters of famous actors and actresses, a testament to Lucy's aspirations. In her bedroom, they found an open bottle of prescription pills and empty beer cans scattered on the floor. It was clear that Lucy had been struggling with her demons, seeking solace in substances that ultimately led to her demise. As the investigation continued, the police interviewed Lucy's friends and acquaintances, trying to unravel the complex web of relationships in her life. One friend, Delia Masterson, a fellow struggling actress, recalled a conversation she had with Lucy just days before her death. Lucy had confided in Delia about her tumultuous relationship with Bobby Nurtek, expressing her frustration and unhappiness. Delia mentioned that Lucy had been receiving threatening messages from an unknown person, adding to her already fragile state of mind. The police obtained Lucy's phone records and discovered a series of text messages from an unknown number. The messages were filled with threats and insults, further adding to the mystery surrounding her death. Detective Cordobiutica reached out to the phone company, hoping to trace the origin of the messages. As the investigation into Lucy Colligard's death continued, the police were faced with a myriad of possibilities. Was Lucy's death the result of her own demons and struggles with substance abuse? Or was there someone else involved, someone who had a motive to silence her forever? Only time would tell as Detective Cordobiutica and her team worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind this tragic event. After weeks of tireless investigation, the truth behind the murder of Bobby Nurtek finally came to light. It was Eliza Nurtek, Bobby's ex-wife, who orchestrated a chilling plot to eliminate him and his allies. Motivated by a deep-seated anger and resentment towards Bobby, Eliza meticulously planned a murder that would ensure he paid for his past transgressions. The police, led by Detective Laura Cordobiutica, painstakingly pieced together the puzzle that revealed Eliza's sinister intentions. Through extensive interviews, forensic analysis, and the examination of various pieces of evidence, they were able to uncover the truth. Eliza's motive for the murder stemmed from Bobby's infidelity and betrayal during their tumultuous, decade-long marriage. She harbored a deep-seated anger towards him, feeling that he had cheated on her multiple times with both men and women. This betrayal fueled her desire for revenge, leading her down a dark and dangerous path. To carry out her plan, Eliza meticulously planned the murder, leaving no detail to chance. She carefully selected the murder weapon, a gun, and executed the crime with cold precision. After shooting Bobby, she staged the crime scene to make it appear as if someone else was responsible. But that was not all. She also murdered his girlfriend, Lucy Colligard, and then planted evidence to make it look like she had died from an overdose. The police, however, were not easily deceived. Through their diligent investigation, they uncovered inconsistencies in Eliza's alibi and discovered the true nature of her relationship with Bobby. They also found evidence linking her to the murder weapon in the staged crime scene. Eliza's web of lies began to unravel, and the truth slowly emerged. On a fateful day in December of 2002, just before Christmas, the police moved swiftly to apprehend Eliza. They arrested her, leaving her shocked and surprised by the swift hand of justice. The community, once gripped by fear and uncertainty, could finally breathe a sigh of relief knowing that the person responsible for these heinous crimes was behind bars. In the aftermath of this tragic event, the community of Lancaster, California was left reeling. The shocking nature of the crimes and the betrayal of trust had a profound impact on the residents. The media frenzy surrounding the case only added to the sense of unease and disbelief. The trial of Eliza Nurtek, the prime suspect in the murder of Bobby Nurtek and Lucy Colligard, was a riveting spectacle. The courtroom was filled with tension as the prosecution and defense presented their cases, each side vying for justice to be served. Prosecutor A.E. Shin Choi, a seasoned legal expert, meticulously built a compelling case against Eliza. With a firm voice and unwavering determination, she presented evidence that painted Eliza as a vengeful and calculating murderer. The prosecution called upon witnesses who testified to Eliza's history of manipulation and deceit, revealing a web of lies that she had spun around Bobby and Lucy. Defense attorney Lena Jacobs-Carcel, a skilled and tenacious lawyer, fought tooth and nail to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. She argued that the evidence against Eliza was circumstantial and that there were other possible suspects who could have committed the crimes. Jacobs-Carcel called upon character witnesses who spoke highly of Eliza's demeanor and disputed the prosecution's claims. The trial was not without its emotional moments. The victims' families, still grieving the loss of their loved ones, sat in the courtroom, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and despair. They listened intently to every word spoken, desperate for justice to be served. After weeks of deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the foreperson stood up and pronounced Eliza Nurtek guilty on all charges. Gasps filled the room, and the victims' families broke into tears, their long-awaited justice finally realized. Eliza Nurtek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Some believed that this punishment was too lenient given the heinous nature of her crimes. Others felt that justice had been served and that Eliza would spend the rest of her days behind bars, paying for the lives she had taken. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of all those involved were forever changed. Eliza Nurtek, now confined to a prison cell, had to face the consequences of her actions. She was sent to the infamous San Quentin State Prison, known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in California. Inside the prison walls, Eliza had to adapt to a strict routine, wearing an orange jumpsuit and spending most of her days in a small cell. She was cut off from the outside world, with limited access to phone calls and visits from loved ones. Meanwhile, Jason Harris Packard, burdened by guilt and haunted by the memories of the past, decided to make a fresh start. He moved away and settled in Bakersfield, where he opened a small bakery. With the help of his mother's secret recipes, Jason baked delicious pastries and bread, bringing joy to the locals. His bakery, named Sweet Delights, quickly gained popularity. As for the community, they slowly moved on from the scandal that had captivated them. However, the memory of Bobby Nurtek's murder would forever linger in their minds, serving as a reminder of the fragility of life and the consequences of one's choices. In the end, the trial brought closure to a dark chapter in the community's history. Though scars remained, the community found solace in the fact that justice had been served. They vowed to learn from the tragedy and to strive for a safer and more compassionate society. As we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files, we reflect on the chilling tale of Nurtek's. In the small town of Lancaster, California, ambition, betrayal, and revenge collided, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. This story serves as a reminder that even in the pursuit of success, one must tread carefully, for the consequences of our actions can be far-reaching and devastating. Lena Klunding was a 36-year-old kindergarten teacher living in Tucson, Arizona. She worked at Sunshine Elementary School, where she was loved by her students and colleagues. Known for her patience and kindness, Lena was the type of teacher who made learning fun and exciting. She often used colorful posters in her classroom, making sure every child felt special and included. Lena lived in a cozy house on a quiet street with her husband Richard and 11-month-old son Dolphin. Her friends often said that Lena's home was filled with laughter and warmth. She had a knack for decorating and often shopped to find the perfect items to make her house a home. Lena's family was very important to her. She was close to her parents, who lived nearby and often helped with Dolphin. Lena dreamed of opening her own daycare center someday, where she could help even more children grow and learn. Lena's friends described her as caring and always willing to lend a hand. She was the type of person who would drop everything to help a friend in need. She volunteered at her local church and was involved in community events. Her warm personality and dedication to her work made her a cherished member of the community. In September 2010, Lena was busy preparing for the new school year. She spent her days setting up her classroom, planning lessons, and making sure everything was perfect for her students. She also spent a lot of time with Dolphin, planning a big celebration for his first birthday. She wanted it to be a special day, full of balloons, cake, and love. She had even ordered a custom cake from a local bakery and invited all her family and friends. In the days leading up to her death, Lena was looking forward to the future. She was excited about the new school year and celebrating Dolphin's first birthday. Her dreams of opening a daycare center and her plans for her son's future were a testament to her loving and nurturing spirit. On the morning of September 12, 2010, the sun was shining brightly in Tucson, Arizona. It was a warm, pleasant day, typical for that time of year. At around 8:00 a.m., Patty Martins, Lena Kleindine's close friend and neighbor, decided to check on Lena. They had planned to go for a morning walk, something they often did together to stay fit and catch up on each other's lives. When Lena didn't show up at the usual time, Patty became worried. Hattie walked over to Lena's house, which was just a few doors down from her own. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She called Lena's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Feeling uneasy, Hattie tried the door and found it unlocked. She slowly stepped inside, calling out Lena's name, but the house was eerily quiet. As Patty made her way through the house, she noticed that everything seemed normal at first. Dolphin's toys were scattered in the living room, and the kitchen had breakfast dishes on the table. But when she reached the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying scene. Lena's lifeless body was lying on the floor, and the room was in disarray. The TV was smashed, and a mirror was shattered, indicating a struggle had taken place. Patty was in shock and felt a wave of fear and sadness wash over her. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she tried to explain what she had found. Her voice was shaky, and she had to repeat herself several times before the operator understood the gravity of the situation. Patty stayed outside, pacing back and forth, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe what had happened to her friend. Neighbors began to gather, whispering among themselves and speculating about what could have led to such a tragic event. The news quickly spread, and soon local media outlets like the Tucson Sentinel were reporting on the shocking discovery. Lena's death sent shockwaves through the community. People who knew her were heartbroken and in disbelief. How could something so terrible happen to someone so kind and loving? As the police began their investigation, everyone hoped for answers and justice for Lena. When the police arrived at Lena Kleindine's house on September 12, 2010, it was a warm, sunny morning in Tucson, Arizona. Detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres, known for their fast response and careful attention to detail at the investigation. The patrol car's flashing lights quickly drew the attention of neighbors, who watched anxiously from their yards and windows. Detectives Ramirez and Torres were both experienced investigators. Ramirez, a tall man in his early 40s, was known for his methodical approach and calm demeanor. Torres, in her late 30s, was sharp-eyed and known for her ability to notice even the smallest details at a crime scene. Together, they made a formidable team. As they entered the house, they were met with a grim scene. The living room showed no signs of a struggle, but the bedroom told a different story. Lena's body lay on the floor, with clear marks of strangulation on her neck. The room was in chaos. A TV lay shattered on the floor, and a large mirror was broken, its shards scattered everywhere. It was clear that a violent confrontation had taken place. The detectives began their investigation immediately. They called in a team of forensic experts who meticulously collected evidence from the scene. They took fingerprints from the broken TV and mirror and gathered samples of hair and fibers that might have been left by the attacker. They also photographed the entire room, documenting the disarray and any potential clues. Outside, neighbors gathered, whispering and speculating about what had happened. Reporters from local news stations like KVOA and the Tucson Sentinel arrived, setting up cameras and interviewing anyone willing to talk. The community was in shock, struggling to comprehend the tragedy that had struck their quiet neighborhood. Detective Ramirez spoke briefly with the media, asking for anyone with information to come forward. They emphasized the importance of community cooperation in solving the case. Meanwhile, Detective Torres interviewed Patty Martins, who had discovered Lena's body. Sarah, still in shot, described finding the door unlocked and a horrifying scene in the bedroom. Back inside, the forensic team found traces of DNA on Lena's body and under her fingernails, likely from trying to fight off her attacker. They bagged these samples carefully, knowing they could be crucial in identifying the killer. They also discovered a set of muddy footprints near the back door, suggesting the attacker had entered or exited through there. The initial investigation painted a picture of a violent struggle, but many questions remained. Who could have committed such a brutal act? And why would anyone want to harm Lena, a beloved teacher and mother? Detectives Ramirez and Torres were determined to find answers and bring justice to Lena and her family. The first person the police investigated was Richard Klondine, Lena's husband. Richard was 38 years old and owned a local hardware store called Klondine's Hardware. He was well-liked in the community for his charming personality and his knack for helping customers find exactly what they needed. However, those who knew him well knew he could also be secretive and controlling behind closed doors. When detectives Jake Ramirez and Maria Torres arrived at Richard's store on September 13, 2010, he seemed calm but surprised to see them. They informed him about Lena's death and asked him to come to the station for questioning. Richard agreed, though he appeared anxious as he closed up his shop, a popular spot among locals for home improvement supplies like tools and paint from well-known brands like DeWalt and Sherwin-Williams. At the station, the detectives started with basic questions. Where was he on the night of the murder? Richard claimed he had been out of town on business, meeting with suppliers in Phoenix, 100 miles away. He provided the name of the hotel where he stayed and said he had receipts to prove it. He seemed confident, but the detectives knew they needed to verify his alibi. As the questioning continued, Richard's demeanor shifted. He became more defensive and agitated, particularly when asked about his relationship with Lena. He admitted they had been having marital problems, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. The detectives noted his change in behavior, but needed more concrete evidence to link him to the crime. While Richard was being questioned, other officers checked his alibi. They contacted the hotel in Phoenix and reviewed security footage. Richard's name was indeed on the guest list, but the detectives found something odd. The footage showed Richard leaving the hotel late at night and not returning until the early hours of the morning. This raised suspicions, as it meant he could have traveled back to Tucson during that time. Detectives Ramirez and Torres pressed Richard further, asking about his whereabouts during those hours. Richard grew more agitated and struggled to provide a clear answer. He claimed he had gone for a drive because he couldn't sleep, but his story lacked details and consistency. As they left the station, Detective Ramirez told Torres they needed to follow every lead. They were determined to uncover the truth about Richard and his potential involvement in Lena's tragic death. The second person the police investigated was Laura Luzarda Klondine, Richard's secret second wife. Laura was 44 years old and worked as a hospice nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Tucson. She was dedicated to her job and known for her kind and caring nature. In her spare time, Laura was an activist, campaigning for public schools to teach students about extraterrestrial civilizations, such as the Vulcans and the Klingons. Detectives Jake Ramirez and Maria Torres visited Laura at her home on September 14, 2010. Laura was visibly shocked and distressed when they told her about Lena's death. She invited them inside and tried to stay calm as they began their questioning. Her son, 16-year-old Marky Mark Lizarda, was also home but stayed in his room, listening anxiously. The detectives asked Laura about her relationship with Richard. She revealed that she had been married to Richard for 2 years, but only recently discovered his marriage to Lena. Laura said she felt betrayed and heartbroken by Richard's deceit. She insisted she had no idea about his double life until a few days ago when she found suspicious documents in his belongings. Laura provided an alibi for the night of Lena's murder. She said she had been working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. She gave the detectives the names of her coworkers who could confirm her presence. Detective Torres took detailed notes and assured Laura they would verify her alibi. Despite her distress, Laura cooperated fully with the investigation. She handed over Richard's documents, which she had kept hidden after discovering them. These included financial records, phone bills, and a mysterious report about Richard's activities. The detectives thanked Laura for her help and left to follow up on her information. At St. Mary's Hospital, the detectives spoke with Laura's coworkers, who confirmed she had been at work the entire night. Security footage from the hospital also showed Laura working her shift, which seemed to clear her of any involvement in the murder. However, the detectives knew they couldn't rule out the possibility that she might have known something more about Richard's activities. Laura's cooperation and solid alibi made it difficult for the detectives to consider her a primary suspect, but they were still cautious. They decided to look deeper into Richard's life and any connections he might have had that could shed light on the case. The mysterious report Laura provided hinted at more secrets, possibly related to Richard's business dealings. As they continued their investigation, detectives Ramirez and Torres remained determined to uncover the truth. Laura's revelations added new layers to the case, making it clear that Richard's double life had far-reaching consequences. On September 18, 2010, a week after Lena Klondine's murder, the weather in Tucson, Arizona, was unusually cool and cloudy. Detective Maria Torres was at the police station, reviewing the case files, when she received an urgent call from a local garbage collection worker who had found something suspicious while collecting trash in a neighborhood not far from Lena's home. Detective Torres and her partner, Detective J. Ramirez, quickly headed to the location, a shopping plaza that housed popular stores like Safeway and Walgreens. The bag looked out of place, and the garbage worker, knowing about the recent high-profile murder, thought it might be important. The detectives carefully opened the bag and found several pairs of men's underwear, a dead end. Meanwhile, the mysterious report Laura Lizarda Klondine had given them earlier became even more relevant. It detailed Richard's involvement in money laundering for Mexican cartels, which explained why he was so secretive. The detectives realized that Richard's illegal activities provided a strong motive for him to silence Lena, who might have discovered his crimes. With the new evidence and a clearer picture of Richard's motives, detectives Ramirez and Torres felt they were closing in on the truth. They knew they needed to interrogate Richard again, this time confronting him with the damning evidence they had uncovered. As they prepared for this critical step, they hoped to finally bring justice for Lena Klondine and her grieving family. As the investigation continued, detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres turned their attention to Marky Mark Lizarda, Laura's 16-year-old son. Marky Mark was a high school student known for his intelligence and strong bond with his mother. His relationship with Richard, his stepfather, had raised some eyebrows in the community due to their unusually close bond. On September 20, 2010, detectives Ramirez and Torres visited Marky Mark at his school, where they met with him in a private room. Marky Mark was visibly nervous but agreed to talk. The detectives started with general questions about his relationship with his mother and Richard. He spoke fondly of both but admitted that things had been tense since the discovery of Richard's double life. When asked about the night of Lena's murder, Marky Mark claimed he was home playing video games and chatting with friends online. He provided the detectives with the names of his friends, who later confirmed his story. However, there was something about Marky Mark's demeanor that made the detectives suspicious. He seemed too eager to prove his innocence and stumbled over his words when discussing his whereabouts. Despite his alibi, the detectives felt that Marky Mark might know more than he was letting on. They decided to dig deeper into his online activities. They obtained a warrant to search his computer and found that on the night of the murder, Marky Mark had searched for information on how to cover up a crime and how to dispose of evidence. This discovery was alarming and made him a key suspect. The detectives brought Marky Mark back in for further questioning. This time he was more agitated and defensive. He claimed the searches were for a school project, but the detectives didn't believe him. They pressed him harder, and under the pressure, Marky Mark finally broke down and confessed. He admitted he had found out about Richard's bigamy before his mother and feared losing him as a father figure. Marky Mark's confession shocked the detectives. The investigation had revealed the dark side of a seemingly normal family, uncovering secrets that would forever change their lives. On September 22, 2010, Tucson, Arizona police were ready to make an arrest. The sky was clear, and the temperature was climbing towards the typical desert heat. Detectives John Ramirez and Maria Torres had gathered enough evidence to confront Marky Mark Lizarda, the 16-year-old who had confessed to killing Lena Klondine in a fit of rage and desperation. Marky Mark's motive was to maintain Richard Klondine as a father figure in his life. He feared losing Richard after discovering his bigamy and was jealous of the role his first family played in his life. In a moment of panic, he broke into Lena's house on the night of September 11, 2010. Inside, a violent confrontation ensued. Lena fought back, but Marky Mark overpowered her, strangling her with a rope he had brought. The struggle left the bedroom in disarray with a smashed TV and a shattered mirror. The detectives pieced together the timeline using surveillance footage, the gas station receipt, and Marky Mark's own internet searches. They knew they had their murderer. On the morning of September 22, they drove to Marky Mark's home to make the arrest. The neighborhood was just starting to wake up, with children waiting for the school bus and people heading to work. Marky Mark was in the living room when the detectives arrived. His mother, Laura, opened the door, her face pale and strained. The detectives explained that they were there to arrest her son. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, allowing them inside. Marky Mark didn't resist as the detectives handcuffed him and read in his rights. He looked more resigned than surprised. As the police led Marky Mark to the car, Laura broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Neighbors watched in stunned silence, unable to process the scene unfolding before them. The arrest of a teenager for such a brutal crime was unimaginable. In the days that followed, the police continued to uncover more about Richard's illegal activities. The report Laura had given them detailed his involvement in money laundering for Mexican cartels. This led to Richard's own arrest and conviction, adding another layer of betrayal and deceit to an already tragic story. Marky Mark's arrest and the subsequent revelations about Richard brought a dramatic end to the investigation. The community was left to heal from the wounds inflicted by the crime, knowing that justice had been served, but at a tremendous cost. The trial of Marky Mark Lizarda began on December 1, 2010, in Tucson, Arizona. The courtroom was packed with media, community members, and the grieving family of Lena Klondine. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Michael Jackson, a seasoned lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach and dedication to seeking justice. Jackson, 45, had a reputation for being tough but fair, and he was determined to secure a conviction for Lena's brutal murder. On the other side was the defense attorney, Sarah Jean Miller. At 38, Miller was a rising star in the legal world, known for her sharp mind and ability to connect with juries. She argued that Marky Mark, being only 16, should be tried as a juvenile and highlighted his troubled upbringing and the influence of Richard Klondine as mitigating factors. The prosecution presented a strong case, focusing on the overwhelming evidence against Marky Mark. They detailed his confession, the forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene, and his internet searches on how to commit murder. Jackson argued that Marky Mark's actions were premeditated and that he should be held fully accountable for his heinous crime. The defense, however, painted a picture of a vulnerable teenager manipulated by his stepfather, Richard. They argued that Marky Mark's actions were those of a desperate young man who feared losing the only father figure he had ever known. Miller called several character witnesses, including teachers and friends, who spoke about Marky Mark's generally good behavior and his struggles with his home life. She urged the jury to consider his age and psychological state. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict on December 15, 2010. Marky Mark was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge, taking into account his age and the circumstances, sentenced him to 25 years in prison. This sentence was seen as a balance between punishment and the possibility of rehabilitation. For Marky Mark, the sentence marked the beginning of a long road ahead. He would serve his time in a juvenile facility until he turned 18, after which he would be transferred to an adult prison. The trial's outcome left a lasting impact on all involved, a sobering reminder of the far-reaching consequences of one tragic night. After the trial, life slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy for those affected by Lena Klondine's tragic murder. For Lena's family, the pain of her loss remained, but they found solace in each other and in the memories they shared. Dolphin, Lena's 8-month-old son, was the light that kept them going, a constant reminder of her love and legacy. For Richard Klondine, the trial marked the end of his deceitful life. With his arrest and conviction for money laundering, his empire of lies crumbled, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The revelation of his crimes shocked the community and tarnished the reputation of his hardware store, once a staple in the neighborhood. Laura Lizarda Klondine faced the difficult task of rebuilding her life after the betrayal of her husband and the loss of Lena. She threw herself into her work as a nurse, finding solace in helping others. Her activism took on new meaning as she advocated for victims of domestic abuse and campaigned for stronger laws to protect families from similar tragedies. As for Marky Mark Lizarda, his life took a drastically different turn after the trial. Incarcerated in a juvenile facility, he had plenty of time to reflect on his actions and the consequences of his choices. With therapy and counseling, he began to confront his past and work towards rehabilitation. Despite the severity of his crime, there were those who believed in his potential for redemption and hoped that he would one day find a path towards healing and forgiveness. As life moved forward, the memory of Lena Klondine remained a beacon of love and hope in the hearts of those who knew her. Her legacy lived on in the lives she touched and the lessons learned from her tragic death. The murder of Lena Klondine is a tragic reminder of the hidden secrets and dangerous lies that can lurk behind closed doors. In the face of unimaginable loss, her family and friends continue to honor her memory, cherishing the warmth and kindness she brought into their lives. Jessica Jessie Harper was a 29-year-old woman living in Athens, Georgia. She worked as a barista at Starbucks, where she was known for her friendly smile and artistic coffee creations. Jessie had a vibrant personality and loved to bring joy to those around her. She often worked on art projects in her free time, dreaming of opening her own gallery someday. Jessie lived in a small apartment close to downtown Athens, where she enjoyed the lively atmosphere and community events. Jessie had a close-knit group of friends and was well-liked by her coworkers. She was sociable, often organizing get-togethers and participating in local art shows. Her friends described her as creative and free-spirited, someone who could light up any room. Jessie was also involved in various local activities, such as volunteering at the animal shelter and attending music festivals. Born and raised in Athens, Jessie attended Clark Central High School and later took some art classes at the University of Georgia. Her family included her elderly husband, Dan Harper, a retired photography professor, and her younger brother, Mark Harper, who lived in Boston. Jessie's relationship with Dan was complicated by their 63-year age difference and Dan's health problems. Despite these challenges, Jessie remained dedicated to her marriage. In the days before her death, Jessie was busy with her usual activities. She had just finished a large mural at a local cafe and was excited about its positive reception. She was also preparing for an art exhibition at a nearby gallery, where she planned to showcase her latest pieces. Jessie spent her days working at Starbucks, catching up with friends, and creating art. She often talked about her future plans and dreams, showing her optimistic outlook on life. However, Jessie's personal life was not without its difficulties. She was involved in a love triangle with her husband, Dan, and her close friend and coworker, Jessica Jess Owens. This complicated relationship added stress to Jessie's life, though she tried to keep a positive attitude. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Jessie Harper's life would come to a tragic end. Her vibrant personality and creative spirit were well known in Athens, and her death shocked the community. Jessie was a beloved figure whose dreams and kindness left a lasting impact on those who knew her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, Athens, Georgia was enjoying a clear, sunny day with temperatures in the mid-70s. The town was quiet, with many people still recovering from the excitement of the recent Twilight Criterium, a popular annual bike race. At 8:30 a.m., Patty Johnson, Jessie's next-door neighbor, began to worry. She hadn't seen Jessie in a few days, which was unusual since they often chatted in the hallway. Patty, a 45-year-old schoolteacher, decided to check on Jessie. She knocked on the door, but got no answer. Knowing Jessie often left a spare key with her, Patty decided to use it. As she opened the door, a sense of dread filled her. The apartment was eerily quiet, with the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. Patty called out Jessie's name, but got no response. As Patty walked into the living room, she made a horrifying discovery. Jessie was lying on the floor, motionless. A silk scarf was tightly wrapped around her neck, and her face was pale. Shocked and terrified, Patty immediately backed out of the apartment and dialed 911, her hands shaking. Within minutes, emergency services arrived at the scene. Paramedics quickly confirmed that Jessie was dead. The police arrived shortly after. Patty was visibly shaken as she spoke with them. She described Jessie as a cheerful and friendly neighbor who had never shown any signs of trouble. Patty's account was filled with sadness and disbelief. She could not understand who would want to hurt Jessie. The news of Jessie's death quickly spread through the community. The local newspaper, the Athens Banner-Herald, reported on the tragic incident, and residents were stunned. Jessie's co-workers at Starbucks were particularly devastated, as they had considered her a close friend. The discovery of Jesse's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would soon reveal the dark secrets of those closest to her. On the morning of August 15, 2010, the Athens Police Department swiftly responded to the 911 call about Jesse Harper's death. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the investigation. Detective Reynolds, known for his calm demeanor and methodical approach, was a veteran in the department. Officer Thompson, respected for her keen attention to detail, was relatively new but already showed promise. Upon arriving at Jesse's apartment, the police immediately secured the area. The living room where Jesse's body was found was unsettling. The sight of the young woman with a silk scarf tightly wrapped around her neck was a chilling image.
The room itself was mostly tidy, but there were signs of a struggle, an overturned coffee table, and a few scattered cushions. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting Jesse knew her attacker. Detective Reynolds began examining the scene, carefully noting every detail. Officer Thompson started taking photographs and collecting evidence. They found fingerprints on the silk scarf and various surfaces in the apartment. But police also took samples for DNA testing. The crime scene investigators dusted for prints, collected fibers, and looked for any other potential clues that could point to the murderer. The Athens police used the latest forensic tools available in 2010. They brought in a luminol spray to check for any hidden bloodstains and used an alternate light source to find fibers or hairs that might not be visible to the naked eye. They also checked Jesse's phone and computer for any recent communications that could provide clues. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson interviewed neighbors and friends. Karen Johnson, who had found Jesse, described the victim as a friendly and cheerful neighbor. She mentioned Jesse's complicated personal life, including her relationships with her husband, Dan Harper, and her friend, Jessica Jess Owens. The investigators also spoke with Jesse's coworkers at Starbucks. They described Jesse as a kind and creative person, but hinted at some recent tension between her and Jess Owens. This information helped the police narrow down their list of suspects. Throughout the day, the police worked diligently to gather all possible evidence from the crime scene. The discovery of Jesse Harper's body had shaken the community, and the police were determined to find her killer. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson knew that solving this case would require piecing together the puzzle of Jesse's life and relationships. Dan Harper, the first suspect, was 92 years old and Jesse's husband. A retired photography professor at the University of Georgia, Dan was famous for his work during the Korean War for Life magazine. He met Jesse when she was 19, and they quickly started dating, despite the 63-year age difference. Dan was known for his adventurous spirit and charm, but his intense nature sometimes led to possessiveness. His frequent hospital visits for health issues created tension in their marriage, adding to the complications of their relationship. The police brought Dan in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds led the interrogation, wanting to understand Dan's perspective and his possible involvement in Jesse's death. Dan appeared heartbroken and tired as he sat down with the detectives. His eyes were filled with sadness, and he spoke softly but firmly, denying any involvement in the crime. Dan described his relationship with Jesse as loving but strained due to his health problems. He admitted to feeling jealous at times, especially when Jesse spent time with her friends or worked late at Starbucks. However, he insisted that he would never harm her. He told the detectives about his last interaction with Jesse, which had been a simple conversation about her upcoming art show. Dan's alibi for the night of the murder was his hospital stay, where he was being treated for a chronic illness. The detectives checked Dan's alibi and found it solid. Hospital records confirmed he was admitted the night Jesse was killed. Despite this, they continued to probe for more information, hoping to uncover any details that could help them understand Jesse's life and potential threats. During the interrogation, Dan remained calm but visibly distraught. He answered the questions patiently, often pausing to collect his thoughts. He expressed deep sorrow over Jesse's death and a strong desire to see her killer brought to justice. Dan's love for Jesse was evident, and its heartbreak seemed genuine. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention to other suspects, but Dan Harper remained a person of interest due to his close relationship with the victim and the complexities within their marriage. They hoped further investigation would reveal more about who could have wanted Jesse dead. The second suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Jessica Jess Owens, a 27-year-old co-worker and close friend of Jesse. Jess Owens worked with Jesse at Starbucks, where their friendship blossomed into a secret sexual relationship.
Jess was known for her warm and friendly personality, but she also struggled with feelings of insecurity, especially about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. On August 16, 2010, the police brought Jess Owens in for questioning at the Athens Police Department. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson led the interrogation. Jess appeared nervous as she entered the room, her eyes red from crying. She sat down and took a deep breath before the questioning began. Jess described her relationship with Jesse as more than just friendship. She admitted they had been involved in a sexual relationship for several months. She spoke about how much she loved Jesse and how their bond had grown stronger over time. Jess explained that while she knew about Jesse's marriage to Dan, she believed Jesse would eventually leave him for her. When asked about the night of the murder, Jess said she had been at home, feeling unwell. She stated that she had not seen Jesse since their shift together at Starbucks the day before. However, her alibi was weak, as no one could confirm her whereabouts during the crucial hours. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson pressed further, asking Jess about any recent arguments or conflicts with Jesse. Jess admitted they had argued a few days before the murder. She confessed that she was jealous and frustrated about Jesse's relationship with Dan, but she insisted she would never harm Jesse. Jess was visibly emotional, her voice trembling as she spoke about how much she missed Jesse. The police searched Jess's apartment and belongings for any evidence linking her to the crime. They found a few items that raised suspicion, including a silk scarf similar to the one used to strangle Jesse. This discovery made Jess a prime suspect, despite her emotional pleas of innocence. Jess's reaction to the interrogation was a mix of sorrow and anxiety. She was cooperative but clearly distressed, repeatedly expressing her love for Jesse and her disbelief that she was a suspect. The police noted her emotional volatility and the contradictions in her statements, which added to their suspicion. As the investigation progressed, the detectives kept Jess Owens under close scrutiny. They knew her complicated relationship with Jesse and her emotional instability could be key to solving the case. Jess remained a central figure in their search for the truth behind Jesse Harper's tragic death. On August 20, 2010, 5 days after Jesse Harper's murder, the weather in Athens, Georgia, was hot and humid. The police were still hard at work trying to solve the case. That morning, a breakthrough came when a maintenance worker found a small piece of paper in the hallway near Jesse's apartment. The paper appeared to be a torn note with handwriting on it. He quickly handed the note over to Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson, who were still investigating the case. The note read, "Meet me at 8. We need to talk. Jay." The detectives believed the note was written by Jess Owens. The handwriting was similar to Jess's, and the detectives knew that Jay was how Jess signed her notes to Jesse. This new piece of evidence shifted the focus back to Jess Owens. The note suggested that she had planned to meet Jesse on the night of the murder. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson re-interviewed Jess Owens, presenting her with the note. Jess looked shocked and admitted that she had written the note, but insisted she had not met Jesse that night. Jess's reaction was a mix of fear and confusion. She repeated her earlier statements about being at home and feeling unwell. Despite her claims, the detectives felt they were getting closer to the truth. They decided to take a closer look at Jess's phone records and text messages. They found several messages between Jess and Jesse, showing a pattern of arguments and reconciliation. The last message from Jess to Jesse read, "I'll be there at 8. We need to sort this bleep out." The detectives also revisited the evidence collected from Jess's apartment. They re-examined the silk scarf they had found, comparing it to the one used to strangle Jesse. Forensic tests showed that both scarves were from the same set, a limited edition sold at a local boutique where both women had shopped. With this new evidence, the detectives were more convinced than ever that Jess Owens was hiding something. They continued to press her, hoping to uncover the full truth about what had happened on the night of August 15. The discovery of the torn note was a significant step forward in the investigation, bringing the police closer to solving the mystery of Jesse Harper's tragic death. The third suspect in Jesse Harper's murder was Maximo Lorona Rodriguez, a 35-year-old local gang leader. Known for his violent past and current involvement in criminal activities, Maximo had a reputation for being both ambitious and controlling. He had a tumultuous relationship with Jess before they broke up, but he never fully moved on and continued to harbor strong feelings for her. On August 21, 2010, the Athens Police Department decided to bring Maximo in for questioning. The weather that day was sweltering, with temperatures soaring into the high 80s.
Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson knew that interviewing Maximo would be challenging given his criminal background and notorious temper. Maximo arrived at the police station, his demeanor guarded and intimidating. Detective Reynolds started the questioning by asking about his relationship with Jesse Harper. Maximo spoke in a low, firm voice, describing how he and Jesse had once been close but had drifted apart after she got married. He admitted that he was still upset about their breakup and had difficulty letting go, but he denied having any involvement in her death. The detectives pressed Maximo about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Maximo claimed he had been with his gang members at a local bar, The Globe, a well-known spot in downtown Athens. He provided names of several individuals who could vouch for him. Despite his alibi, Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson were skeptical. They knew that Maximo's gang could easily cover for him if he was involved in a crime. The police checked Maximo's alibi by interviewing patrons and staff at the Globe. Some confirmed seeing him there, but the timeline was fuzzy, leaving gaps that could not be accounted for. Additionally, the police found no physical evidence linking Maximo directly to the crime scene, but his volatile nature and unresolved feelings for Jesse kept him under suspicion. Maximo's reaction during the interrogation was a mix of anger and frustration. He was cooperative to an extent but became increasingly agitated when the detectives suggested he might have a motive for killing Jesse. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, insisting he was being targeted because of his past. Despite Maximo's strong denials, the detectives remained cautious. They knew that his history of violence and his lingering emotions for Jesse made him a potential suspect. They continued to gather evidence and monitor his activities, hoping to find something that could either incriminate or exonerate him. On August 25, 2010, the Athens Police Department made a breakthrough in the Jesse Harper murder case. The day was hot and sultry, with temperatures reaching into the low 90s. Detective Michael Reynolds and Officer Sarah Thompson were going through the evidence once again when it received the final forensic report. The report confirmed that the fingerprints on the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse matched those of Jess Owens. With this crucial piece of evidence, police were now confident that Jess Owens was the murderer. Jess, 27, had been Jesse's co-worker and secret lover. She was known for her friendly and sensitive nature, but struggled with jealousy and insecurity about Jesse's relationship with her husband, Dan Harper. Jess's emotions had spiraled out of control, leading her to commit the crime. Jess's motive was a combination of love, fear, and desperation. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Jesse to Dan. On the night of the murder, Jess went to Jesse's apartment, hoping to resolve their issues. However, the conversation quickly turned into a heated argument. In a fit of rage and desperation, Jess grabbed one of Jesse's silk scarves and strangled her. Detective Reynolds and Officer Thompson reviewed the timeline and evidence carefully before making their move. They knew they needed to arrest Jess before she could flee or destroy more evidence. The police arrived at Jess's apartment in the late afternoon, when the heat of the day had started to wane. Jess Owens was taken by surprise when the officers knocked on her door. She opened it, looking anxious and tired. The detectives informed her of the charges and placed her under arrest. Jess's reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. She didn't resist and was quietly taken to the police station. News of Jess's arrest spread quickly through Athens. Jesse Harper's family were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but heartbroken to learn it was someone Jesse had trusted and loved. The community, too, was shaken by the revelation that Jess Owens, a seemingly gentle and kind woman, could commit such a violent act. As Jess was led away in handcuffs, she seemed to accept her fate. The police had uncovered the truth, and justice for Jesse Harper was now within reach. The arrest of Jess Owens marked a significant step in the case, bringing closure to Jesse's grieving family and friends. The trial of Jess Owens began on October 15, 2010, in Athens, Georgia. The courtroom was packed with media, friends, and family, all eager to see justice served for Jesse Harper. The prosecutor, Lisa Bennett, was a determined 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough on crime. She opened the case by presenting the evidence against Jess, including the forensic report and the silk scarf used to strangle Jesse. Lisa argued that Jess's jealousy and desperation led her to commit the murder. The defense attorney, Laird Stevens, a 50-year-old known for his calm and collected demeanor, argued that Jess Owens had acted in a moment of emotional turmoil and did not intend to kill Jesse. He emphasized Jess's emotional instability and tried to paint her as a victim of her own feelings.
He called on character witnesses to testify about Jess's generally kind and gentle nature, hoping to elicit sympathy from the jury. Throughout the trial, Jessie Harper's family sat in the front row, visibly emotional. Her mother, Carol Harper, often clutched a photo of Jessie, tears streaming down her face. The trial brought back painful memories for them, but they remained hopeful that justice would be served. The jury deliberated for 3 days, carefully considering all the evidence and arguments. On October 25, 2010, they reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreman stood up and announced the decision. Jess Owens was found guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict brought a mix of relief and sadness to Jessie's family. They were glad that justice had been served, but were also deeply saddened by the tragic circumstances. The judge sentenced Jess Owens to 25 years in prison. As the sentence was read, Jess showed little emotion. She seemed resigned to her fate, understanding that her actions had irreversible consequences. The severity of the sentence was seen as appropriate by many, given the premeditated nature of the crime. The media covered the trial extensively, with local news stations like LUSB TV and newspapers like the Athens Banner Herald reporting on every detail. The public reaction was mixed. Some felt the sentence was just, while others believed it was too lenient, considering the loss of Jessie Harper's life. The trial and its outcome had a profound impact on all those involved. For Jessie's family, it marked the end of a painful chapter, but the loss they felt was permanent. The community of Athens was left to grapple with the reality that such a tragic event could occur in their town. After the trial of Jess Owens, life slowly began to move on for everyone involved, but the impact of Jessie Harper's murder was lasting. Jessie's family, particularly her mother, struggled with the grief of losing their vibrant daughter. Dan Harper, Jessie's husband, faced a different kind of aftermath. He had lost not only his wife, but also his reputation was tainted by the scandal of the love triangle. Dan, who had been a respected retired photography professor, decided to move to a smaller town in North Georgia to start anew. He spent his days focusing on his health and his passion for photography, hoping to find peace in his work. Jess Owens began serving her 25-year sentence at the Pulaski State Prison. She enrolled in educational programs and sought therapy to address her emotional issues. Jess's time in prison was marked by self-reflection and an effort to understand the depth of her actions and their consequences. She often expressed remorse for what she had done, writing letters to Jessie's family in hopes of finding some form of redemption. The Athens community was also affected by the murder and the trial. Local businesses, including the Starbucks where Jessie and Jess had worked, held a memorial for Jessie. Friends and coworkers gathered to share memories and honor her life. The case had brought the community closer, reminding everyone of the importance of supporting one another in times of tragedy. Maximo Lorona Rodriguez, once a suspect, faced his own legal battles unrelated to Jessie's murder. He continued to be involved in gang-related activities and was eventually convicted for his previous crimes. His life took a different path, but the investigation into Jessie's murder had brought his violent past into the spotlight. Life after the trial was about healing and finding ways to move forward for all those touched by Jessie Harper's tragic death. The community of Athens, along with Jessie's friends and family, worked to honor her memory and support each other through the lasting pain of their loss. Richard Angelbert was a 48-year-old man living in Littleton, Colorado. He was a well-known real estate agent in the community, often seen driving around in his sleek black BMW with the license plate Sexy Realtor, showing homes to clients. Richard was married to Wendy, a school principal, and had a stepson named Harrison. He graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in business and had been in the real estate business for over 20 years. People in Littleton trusted Richard because he always seemed friendly and reliable. Richard lived in a large 2-story house with a well-manicured lawn. His neighbors often saw him working in the yard, greeting them with a warm smile and a wave. He was involved in local events and charity fundraisers, often sponsoring local Little League teams and attending church on Sundays. Richard seemed to have the perfect life, with a beautiful home, a successful career, and a loving family. However, Richard had a secret life. For the past 2 years, he had been in a sexual relationship with his stepson, Harrison. Richard kept this relationship hidden from everyone, fearing it would ruin his reputation and career. In addition to this, he continued to meet other men for sex through his work, using the homes he showed as secret meeting places. These double lives created a lot of stress and tension for Richard. In the days before his death, Richard was busy with work, closing deals and meeting clients. He spent long hours at the office and often came home late. He was looking forward to a weekend getaway to the Bahamas with his wife Wendy, hoping to relax and forget about his troubles for a while. Richard was also planning to attend a 4th of July barbecue at a friend's house, where he expected to catch up with old friends and enjoy some time away from his hectic life. Richard's friends described him as charismatic and charming. He had a way of making people feel comfortable and important. Despite his friendly exterior, Richard was deeply troubled by his hidden life. He felt guilty about his affair with Harrison and the lies he told to keep it a secret. He was also worried about Wendy finding out, fearing it would destroy their marriage and his standing in the community. In his last days, Richard was a man under pressure, trying to juggle his public persona with this private turmoil. His dreams of a perfect life were slowly unraveling, leading to a tragic and violent end. On June 27, 2014, around 3:00 p.m., Wendy Engelbert returned early from her job as a school principal. She was looking forward to a relaxing evening, maybe watching some shows on Netflix and catching up on her favorite book. As she walked through the front door of their house on Bleak Street in Littleton, Colorado, everything seemed normal at first. She put her keys on the kitchen counter and called out for Richard, but there was no answer. Feeling a bit uneasy, Wendy decided to check the basement where Richard often spent time working on his real estate files or watching the History Channel. As she descended the stairs, she noticed that the basement door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. She called his name again, louder this time, but still no response. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she was met with a scene of horror. Richard's lifeless body was sprawled on the floor, surrounded by signs of a violent struggle. There were bloodstains on the carpet and furniture, and Richard's face was bruised and battered. A men's luxury belt was wrapped tightly around his neck, clearly used to choke him to death. Wendy screamed in terror and rushed to her husband's side, shaking him and desperately trying to wake him up. But it was too late. In a state of shock and disbelief, Wendy grabbed her cell phone and dialed 911. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the operator, her voice cracking with emotion. "My husband is dead. I think he's been murdered," she cried, struggling to catch her breath. The operator tried to calm her down and instructed her to stay on the line until the police arrived. Wendy's neighbor, Luby Johnson-Gantz, heard the commotion and came over to see what was happening. She found Wendy sitting on the front steps, sobbing uncontrollably. Luby stayed with Wendy, trying to comfort her while they waited for the police. The minutes felt like hours, and Wendy's mind raced with questions about who could have done this and why. When the police finally arrived, they quickly secured the scene and escorted Wendy and Luby away from the basement. Wendy was in a state of shock, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. She kept repeating, "Who would do this to Richard?" over and over again, her mind unable to process the brutal reality of her husband's death. The discovery of Richard's body sent shockwaves through the quiet community of Littleton. News of the murder spread quickly, with neighbors and friends gathering outside the Engelbert home, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had struck their seemingly perfect neighborhood. On June 27, 2014, at 3:15 p.m., the Littleton Police Department received a frantic 911 call from Wendy Engelbert. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes, led by Detective James Cabell, a seasoned investigator known for his meticulous approach. The Engelbert home, located on the quiet Oak Street, was quickly surrounded by police cars, and yellow crime scene tape was stretched around the perimeter. Detective Cabell and his team entered the basement, where they were confronted with a grisly scene. Richard Engelbert's body lay on the floor, with a men's luxury belt wrapped tightly around his neck. Bloodstains were visible on the carpet and nearby furniture, indicating a violent struggle. Detective Cabell, a spry man in his late 40s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, took in the scene with a steely resolve. The police began their investigation by collecting evidence. They photographed the scene from various angles, documenting every detail. The belt used in the murder was carefully bagged as evidence, and detectives searched for fingerprints and any other clues that might lead to the killer. Detective Cabell noted the overturned furniture and signs of a struggle, indicating that Richard had fought for his life. Forensic experts arrived to process the scene, using luminol to detect blood traces and collecting samples for DNA analysis. They meticulously combed the area for hair, fibers, and any other potential evidence. The brutality of the murder shocked even the most experienced officers, but they remained focused on gathering all the information they could. Detective Cabell interviewed Wendy Engelbert, who was still in shock from discovering her husband's body. She described her day and the horrifying moment she found Richard.
Her account was detailed and emotional, but she insisted she had no idea who could have done this. Wendy's alibi was quickly verified, as she had been at work at the time of the murder. Next, the police began canvassing the neighborhood. They spoke with neighbors, including Luby Johnson-Gantz, who had come to Wendy's aid. Sarah described hearing Wendy's screams and finding her on the front steps, distraught and incoherent. Other neighbors mentioned seeing Richard earlier in the day, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The police also checked Richard's recent phone and email records, hoping to find any leads. They discovered several suspicious messages and calls suggesting that Richard had been meeting with various men for illicit sex. This revelation added a new layer to the investigation, pointing to potential motives related to Richard's hidden life. As the day turned into evening, the police continued their work, determined to find the person responsible for Richard Engelbert's brutal murder. The scene was cleared, and Detective Cattle and his team reviewed the evidence collected, preparing for the next steps in their investigation. The community of Littleton watched anxiously, hoping for answers and justice for Richard Engelbert. The first suspect in Richard Engelbert's murder was his wife, Wendy Engelbert. Wendy, 47, was a respected school principal in Littleton, known for her intelligence and strong personality. She had been with the school district for over 15 years and was heavily involved in community activities. Her colleagues described her as dedicated and authoritative, always striving for excellence. Wendy was brought in for questioning the day after the murder on June 28, 2014. Detective James Cattle led the interrogation, trying to piece together her actions and emotions. Wendy appeared exhausted and distraught, but she answered questions calmly. She recounted her day at work and the horrifying discovery of Richard's body when she returned home. Despite her composed demeanor, Wendy's anger and confusion were evident. She expressed disbelief and frustration over the affair, insisting she had no idea Richard was sexually involved with other men. The revelation of the affair added tension to the interrogation, as Detective Cattle probed deeper into Wendy's feelings about her husband's betrayal. Detective Cattle asked Wendy about her relationship with Richard. She admitted they have a strong partnership, but mentioned that they had faced some challenges recently. Wendy claimed she was unaware of Richard's secret life. She explained she had recent ski injury which had caused her difficulty in reading people's actions, and suggested this might be why she missed any signs of Richard's double life. Wendy's alibi was solid. She had been at the school all day, attending meetings and preparing for the upcoming school year. Colleagues and security footage confirmed her presence at work during the time of the murder. Nonetheless, her connection to the victim made her a person of interest. Detective Cattle also explored Wendy's possible motives. Her reputation and career were crucial to her, and Richard's affair threatened both. However, Wendy firmly denied any involvement in the murder, maintaining her innocence throughout the questioning. She was cooperative and provided all requested information, including access to her phone and emails. The police conducted a thorough search of the Engelbert home, looking for any evidence that might link Wendy to the crime. They found nothing incriminating, reinforcing her alibi and statements. Still, the detectives remained cautious, aware that emotions could drive even the most rational individuals to commit desperate acts. Wendy was released after several hours of questioning, but she remained under scrutiny as the investigation continued. The police kept a close watch on her, monitoring her interactions and movements while they explored other leads. The murder of Richard Engelbert was proving to be a complex case, with layers of secrets and motives slowly unraveling. Harrison Engelbert, Richard's 21-year-old stepson, was the next suspect. Harrison was a college student and part-time bartender, known for his troubled past. He had been in and out of rehab and 12-step programs as a teenager. Despite these challenges, Harrison was determined to turn his life around and was pursuing a degree in psychology at a local community college. On June 28, 2014, Harrison was brought in for questioning. Detective James Cattle, aware of the sensitive nature of Harrison's relationship with Richard, approached the interrogation with caution. Harrison appeared nervous but cooperative, willing to share his side of the story. Harrison admitted to the police that he had been in a secret sexual relationship with his stepfather for the past 2 years. He described feeling conflicted, struggling with the deceit and secrecy. Harrison revealed that he had recently broken off the affair after discovering that Richard had been cheating on him with dozens of other men, using homes he showed as a real estate agent as secret meeting places. During the interrogation, Harrison expressed a mix of anger and sadness. He felt betrayed by Richard, not only because of the affair but also because of the lies and manipulation.
Despite his resentment, Harrison claimed he had no intention of harming Richard. He stated that he had been bartending on the night of the murder, and several witnesses confirmed his alibi. Detective Cattle delved deeper into Harrison's possible motives. The young man's history of emotional turmoil and substance abuse raised concerns, but his recent efforts to stay sober and focused on his studies painted a different picture. Harrison was open about his struggles and his desire to move forward, away from the toxic relationship with Richard. The police also examined Harrison's electronic devices and social media accounts, looking for any evidence of his involvement in the crime. They found messages between him and Richard that showed tension and conflict, but nothing that directly implicated him in the murder. Harrison's DNA was found at the crime scene, but as he lived in the house, this was not unexpected. Harrison's cooperation and consistent alibi made it difficult for the police to pin the crime on him. He was released after several hours of questioning, but he remained a key figure in the investigation. The police continued to monitor his activities and interactions, searching for any inconsistencies or new evidence that might shed light on his involvement. The complex dynamics between Richard and Harrison added a layer of complexity to the case, leaving Detective Cattle and his team with more questions than answers. As they continued to dig deeper, they hoped to uncover the truth behind Richard Engelbert's brutal murder. Alexa Hernandez, 30, was the third suspect in the investigation. Alexa had a history with Richard Engelbert that made her a person of interest. She had once caught Richard having sex with her husband in the bathroom of a house they were touring together, which led to the end of her marriage. Known for her fiery temper, Alexa had several confrontations with Richard since the incident. On June 29, 2014, Detective James Cattle brought Alexa in for questioning. Alexa was a waitress at a popular local diner and had a reputation for being outspoken and strong-willed. She walked into the interrogation room with a defiant expression, ready to defend herself. Detective Cattle started by asking Alexa about her relationship with Richard. She admitted that she despised him for ruining her marriage and causing her immense emotional pain. Alexa described the day she discovered her husband and Richard together as the worst day of her life. She had confronted Richard several times after that, demanding answers and an apology, but he had always brushed her off. When asked about her whereabouts on the day of the murder, Alexa said she had been working a double shift at a diner called Denny's. She provided the names of her coworkers who could verify her alibi. Detective Cattle called the diner and spoke with Alexa's manager, who confirmed that Alexa had been at work all day. Multiple coworkers also confirmed seeing her during her shifts. Despite her solid alibi, Detective Cattle explored Alexa's possible motives further. Her intense anger toward Richard was evident, but she insisted she had moved on and was focusing on rebuilding her life. Alexa shared that she was taking night classes at a local community college, hoping to become a social worker and help others who had gone through similar struggles. The police searched Alexa's home and car, looking for any evidence that might link her to the crime. They found nothing suspicious or incriminating. Alexa's phone records and social media activity showed no contact with Richard in the weeks leading up to the murder. Throughout the interrogation, Alexa remained calm and composed, despite her obvious disdain for Richard. She answered all questions directly and showed no signs of guilt or deception. Detective Cattle noted her cooperation and honesty, but knew they had to keep all possibilities open. After several hours of questioning, Alexa was released. The police continued to monitor her, aware that her past with Richard made her a potential suspect. However, her alibi and lack of evidence made it difficult to tie her to the crime directly. The investigation into Richard Engelbert's murder grew more complex with each interview. Detective Cattle and his team were determined to uncover the truth, but the web of secrets and lies surrounding Richard's life made their task increasingly challenging. They pressed on, hoping to find the piece of evidence that would finally reveal the killer. On July 3, 2014, the investigation took a dramatic turn. It was a hot summer day in Littleton, Colorado, with temperatures reaching the high 80s. Around 10 o'clock a.m., Detective James Cattle received a call from the forensic lab. They had found crucial new evidence while re-examining items from the crime scene. Among Richard Engelbert's belongings was a small hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector installed in the basement. Detective Cattle and his team immediately retrieved the footage. The camera had recorded the basement's activities for the past few weeks, capturing Richard's secret meetings and interactions. As they reviewed the footage, they discovered a recording from the day of the murder. The video showed a heated argument between Richard and his stepson. Harrison Engelbert. The argument quickly escalated into a physical struggle. In the video, Harrison grabbed the luxury belt from a nearby chair and used it to choke Richard in a fit of rage. The footage captured the entire incident, providing undeniable evidence of Harrison's involvement in the murder. The teen was shocked by the brutality and clear motive behind the act: anger and betrayal. With this new evidence, Detective Cattle contacted Harrison and asked him to come in for further questioning. Harrison arrived at the station, unaware of the video evidence against him. During the interrogation, Cattle confronted him with the footage. Harrison's demeanor changed instantly. His initial calmness turned to panic and desperation. Realizing he had been caught, Harrison broke down and confessed. He explained that he felt trapped in the relationship with Richard, manipulated by both his stepfather and his mother, Wendy. The constant deceit and Richard's infidelity had pushed him to his breaking point. Harrison admitted that, in a moment of uncontrollable rage, he had killed Richard to free himself from the suffocating situation. Detective Cattle carefully documented Harrison's confession, ensuring every detail was recorded. The new evidence, combined with the confession, left no doubt about Harrison's guilt. The police now had a clear picture of the events leading up to Richard Engelbert's murder and the complex web of secrets and lies that had surrounded the case. On July 4, 2014, just before noon, the Littleton Police Department made a decisive move. With Harrison Engelbert's confession and the incriminating video evidence, Detective James Cattle and his team were ready to arrest him for the murder of Richard Engelbert. Harrison, 21, a college student and part-time bartender, had been living a life of turmoil and confusion. Despite his attempts to overcome his troubled past, the intense emotional pressure from his affair with his stepfather and his mother's manipulations had driven him to a breaking point. The police learned that Harrison, overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal and manipulation, had killed Richard in a fit of rage. On the day of the arrest, Detective Cattle and several officers arrived at Harrison's apartment. They knocked on the door, and Harrison, looking pale and exhausted, answered. He was handcuffed and read his rights. Harrison seemed resigned to his fate, showing little emotion as he was led to the police car. The neighborhood was quiet, but a few curious onlookers watched as the scene unfolded. Back at the station, Harrison was formally charged with the murder of Richard Engelbert. Detective Cattle conducted a final interview to document all the details of Harrison's confession. Harrison reiterated his feelings of being trapped and manipulated by Richard and pressured by his mother, Wendy. He described the events leading up to the murder, including the violent argument that had escalated into the fatal attack. Wendy Engelbert, Richard's wife and Harrison's mother, was also brought in for questioning. The investigation had revealed that Wendy had known about the affair for months and had pressured Harrison to continue it. She feared that Richard's reckless sexual behavior would ruin her chances in the upcoming election for school superintendent. Wendy, however, was not directly involved in the murder. Her deception and manipulation added a layer of complexity to the case, but she was not charged with any crime. Richard's family was shocked by the revelations. They had seen Richard as a devoted husband and father, unaware of his double life. The arrest of Harrison brought a mix of emotions: grief for Richard's death, anger at the betrayal, and a sense of tragic inevitability given the circumstances. The community of Littleton was stunned by the news. The murder had exposed a hidden world of secrets and lies, shaking the town to its core. As Harrison awaited trial, the Engelbert family and the entire community tried to come to terms with the shocking events that had unfolded. The police had solved the case, but the emotional aftermath would linger for a long time. The truth about Richard's life and death had been revealed, but the scars left behind would take much longer to heal. The trial of Harrison Engelbert began on August 15, 2014 in Littleton, Colorado. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, and local media, all eager to hear the details of the case. The trial was a significant event in the community, drawing attention from both local and national news outlets. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Laura Mitchell, a 45-year-old known for her strong courtroom presence and dedication to justice. She argued that Harrison's murder of Richard Engelbert was premeditated and driven by deep-seated anger and betrayal. She presented the hidden camera footage and Harrison's confession as key evidence. Mitchell emphasized that Harrison's actions were the result of a troubled and volatile relationship, but ultimately, he was responsible for the brutal death of his stepfather. The defense was represented by non-binary advocate Z. Barnes, a 40-year-old attorney with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. Barnes argued that Harrison's actions were the result of intense emotional turmoil and manipulation from both Richard and his mother, Wendy. They claimed that Harrison's unstable mental state and the pressure he faced made it difficult for him to control his actions. Barnes sought a verdict of guilty, but with consideration for a lesser charge, hoping for a more lenient sentence due to the circumstances. During the trial, the victim's family, including Wendy Engelbert and other relatives, sat quietly, visibly distressed by the proceedings. They had been shocked by the revelations of Richard's double life and the turmoil it had caused. Their emotional reactions were palpable as they listened to the details of the affair and the murder. On September 5, 2014, the jury returned with a verdict. Harrison Engelbert was found guilty of second-degree murder. The jury determined that while Harrison had acted in a fit of rage, the killing was not premeditated. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some felt the verdict was just, given the emotional and psychological factors involved. Others felt it was too lenient, given the brutality of the crime. Harrison was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing brought a sense of closure to the case, but the pain and trauma for Richard's family were far from over. The Engelbert family struggled to find peace, knowing that Richard's death had been caused by someone so close to them. The trial's impact extended beyond the courtroom. It forced the community to confront the hidden realities of betrayal and manipulation, leaving a lasting mark on Littleton. As the case concluded, the Engelbert family and the town of Littleton began the difficult process of healing from the shocking events that had unfolded. After the trial of Harrison Engelbert concluded in September 2014, life in Littleton, Colorado, slowly began to return to normal, but the impact of the case lingered. The community, deeply shaken by the brutal murder of Richard Engelbert and the subsequent revelations, faced a long process of healing and adjustment. Harrison Engelbert, now serving a 25-year prison sentence, remained in the Colorado Department of Corrections. His life behind bars was marked by the same struggles he faced outside, dealing with his own emotions and the consequences of his actions. In prison, Harrison was reportedly quiet and withdrawn, focusing on completing his education through available programs. He used the time to reflect on his past decisions and seek counseling for his emotional issues. Wendy Engelbert, Richard's wife, had her own challenges to face. The trial had exposed her knowledge of Richard's affair and her manipulative actions, which had a significant impact on her personal and professional life. The scandal affected her candidacy for school superintendent, a position she had been campaigning for diligently. Despite her previous efforts to present a perfect image, the revelations led to her withdrawal from the race. Wendy tried to rebuild her life away from the public eye, seeking therapy to cope with the emotional fallout and to address the impact of the scandal on her reputation. In the months following the trial, Littleton began to move forward, though the scars of the case remained. The community held memorials and support events to honor Richard Engelbert's memory and to support those affected by the crime. The Engelbert family's tragedy served as a sobering reminder of the hidden struggles that can lie behind closed doors. As life resumed its normal pace, the case remained a poignant chapter in Littleton's history, a reminder of the deep impact of betrayal and violence on individuals and communities alike. The story of Richard Engelbert's murder is a tragic reminder of the complexities and hidden secrets that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. It's a tale of manipulation, deceit, and the devastating consequences of living a double life.